Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yamin of Revolution. Get your house in order and prepare for the worst. Iran has Trump begging daily, but it's too late. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Well, let's get right into the content. There's no good news, all bad news for the U.S. and Israel.
In a stunning development that has sent shockwaves through the Pentagon and intelligence communities across the globe, Iran's military has executed a meticulously planned maritime interdiction operation in the strategic Strait of Hormuz, capturing a cargo vessel allegedly carrying a combined force of U.S. Marines and Mossad operatives. The vessel, identified by Iranian military intelligence as the MV Oceanus, was flying under a Djiboutian flag, a deliberate ploy designed to slip past the heightened security protocols that have choked the strait over the past 72 hours.
New images near the Strait of Hormuz off Iran, where new attacks are now sending oil prices on another wild ride today. This is a Thai-flagged ship, one of at least 3 vessels that have been struck.
A U.S. merchant vessel, U.S.-owned merchant vessel off the coast of Iraq was struck.
IRGC says its naval forces fired missiles that severely struck a U.S. military Sealift Command combat support vessel operating in regional water.
According to intelligence disclosures circulating in Tehran and confirmed by sources speaking to Iranian state media, the ship was not merely a transport vessel, but a forward operating base for a specialized unit tasked with infiltrating Iran's coastal defense network. The operation unfolded in the early hours of the morning when Iranian naval special forces, supported by aerial reconnaissance drones, descended upon the vessel via fast attack craft, securing the ship before its crew could execute a scorched earth protocol to destroy the evidence hidden in its holds. This seizure represents not just a tactical victory, but a profound intelligence windfall for Tehran, exposing the intricate web of deception the United States and its Israeli allies were weaving to destabilize the region. As the world digests this high-stakes capture, the military landscape surrounding the Persian Gulf has grown exponentially more volatile. In the hours following the operation, flight tracking data and open-source intelligence confirmed
Now, to capture these U.S. Marines, I'm still waiting on Dr. O to release some more information. He's supposed to be releasing it later on today. I did see a video the other day about these so-called Marines captured trying to go into these islands. Looking like it might be some truth to that. We'll find out more later.
Precedented surge in American air power transiting through the United Kingdom. 12 A-10C. Thunderbolt II aircraft, the legendary Warthogs, known for their tank-busting capabilities, were spotted landing at RAF Lakenheath in Suffolk, with a second wave of 6 additional aircraft expected to follow. While the U.S. military has remained officially silent on their mission, aviation analysts and defense correspondents note that these ground attack platforms are being retrofitted for a specific role, hunting Iranian fast attack boats and neutralizing the swarm tactics that Iran has perfected over decades of asymmetric warfare. These aircraft, bearing the markings of the Michigan Air National Guard, are not merely passing through Europe for routine exercises. Their deployment is a clear indicator of a shift in American strategy, a pivot toward preparing the battle space for what appears to be an imminent ground operation in Iran. The presence of these aircraft at Lakenheath, a key staging post for transatlantic movements, suggests that the United States is finalizing its logistics chain, setting the stage for a massive injection of close air support into the region aimed directly at the Iranian coastline. Before we dive deeper into how Tehran is preparing to dismantle these American ambitions, I need to ask something of you. If you're watching this, you understand that honest, unfiltered journalism is the only thing standing between the truth and the propaganda machines of Washington and Tel Aviv. I need you to hit that like button. Smash it if you stand with sovereignty against empire. Share this video to break through the algorithmic censorship that tries to bury these stories. Drop a comment, even if it's just a dot, or better yet, tell me what you think about Netanyahu and Trump's latest miscalculation. Subscribe to this channel if you believe in journalism that doesn't bow to the Pentagon. We cannot do this without you. Now, let's get into the details of how this entire operation was exposed. Let's paint a picture of what was intended, because the details emerging from Iranian military interrogations and intelligence assessments paint a terrifying picture of the sabotage that was planned. That was the MV Oceanus, operating under the radar with a seemingly innocent Djiboutian registry, was designed to bypass the high-security gauntlet of the Strait of Hormuz by blending in with commercial traffic. The Iranian military, however, has been tracking this vessel for weeks, long before the recent closure of the strait. According to detailed reports from Iranian intelligence agencies, the ship's manifest was a forgery, hiding a contingent of American Special Forces operators, specifically U.S. Marines trained in maritime raids, alongside Mossad technical agents whose expertise lay in electronic warfare and signal interception. Their objective was as audacious as it was reckless: to land covertly on the Iranian coastline, not to capture territory, but to dismantle the defensive architecture that protects the strait from the inside out. Had this infiltration succeeded, the consequences would have been catastrophic for Iran's naval posture. Imagine the scene: a small, highly trained team, guided by Mossad's cutting-edge cyber capabilities, infiltrating the network of coastal defense batteries and radar installations that line the Strait of Hormuz. Their mission would have been to sow chaos, laying limpet mines on Iranian fast-attack craft docked at hidden bases, jamming communications frequencies during a critical window, and marking strategic targets for the incoming A-10 Warthogs. By eliminating the Iranian military's early warning systems, they aimed to create a blind spot, a gap in the defensive shield through which a larger naval armada could pour, their ultimate target, Karg Island. By neutralizing the defenders and disabling the anti-ship missile batteries that protect the island, these operatives would have laid the groundwork for a lightning amphibious and airborne assault, allowing the thousands of U.S. Marines and paratroopers currently stationed in the region to seize Iran's primary oil export terminal with minimal initial resistance. It was a classic destabilization play: destroy the defenders from within before the main force even arrives. But the Iranian military proved once again that American operational security is a laughingstock in the world of intelligence. The plan was exposed. The MV Oceanus was tracked, intercepted, and seized before it could reach its designated landing zone. The American and Israeli operatives aboard, stripped of their diplomatic cover, are now in custody, providing a treasure trove of intelligence to Iranian interrogators. This exposes a fundamental flaw in American strategic thinking: their repeated belief that they can outsmart Iranian intelligence with the same tired tactics. Time and again, the United States reveals a stunning lack of creativity. Their doctrine for confronting Iran appears to be stuck in a loop of shock and awe fantasies, recycled from the playbooks of Iraq and Afghanistan, nations that possessed none of the geographic depth, military cohesion, or ideological fortitude that Iran possesses. They rely on deception that gets exposed, on proxy forces that dissolve, and on technological superiority that is consistently countered by low-cost, high-impact, asymmetric warfare. The seizure of this ship is just the latest in a long line of embarrassments, proving that while the U.S. military-industrial complex builds expensive toys, the Iranian military builds effective trap. Let's be brutally honest about what the United States is now contemplating: a ground invasion to capture Karg Island. The chatter in Washington, amplified by Trump's extensions of deadlines and vague threats, suggests that the plan is to seize this strategic island, through which 90% of Iran's oil exports flow, to force Tehran to the negotiating table. The Americans believe that by taking Karg, they can choke the Iranian economy. But what they fail to grasp, or perhaps they do grasp but are too arrogant to acknowledge, is that Karg Island is not a soft target. It is a fortress designed to devour invaders. Iranian military officials have repeatedly warned that any boots on the ground will be met with real hell, and the preparations visible on the island suggest they meant every word. Let me walk you through what the Americans would face. The U.S. plans reportedly involve approximately 4,500 Marines conducting an amphibious assault via Osprey tilt-rotor aircraft and LKC hovercraft, supported by 2,000 paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne dropping under cover of darkness. But to even reach the beaches of Karg, this invasion force must first survive the gauntlet of the Strait of Hormuz. Iranian military strategists have littered the Persian Gulf coastline with hundreds of concealed missile batteries and drone launch sites. As the American naval ships attempt to navigate northward, they would be subjected to saturation attacks from low-cost, high-mobility platforms. The A-10 Warthogs, while effective against fast boats, would be operating in an environment saturated with man-portable air defense systems, man-pads, and short-range ballistic missiles that Iran has deployed in depth. The Iranian military does not need to sink an aircraft carrier. They simply need to destroy the logistics vessels and landing craft to turn the Gulf into a graveyard of American ambition. And even if, by some miracle of firepower, the Americans managed to set foot on Karg, the nightmare would only intensify. Iranian military forces have spent decades preparing for exactly this scenario. The island is not just defended by conventional troops. It is a honeycomb of pre-sighted artillery, anti-infantry mines, and, most critically, swarms of FPV, first-person view drones. Footage emerging from Iranian military sources shows the deployment of hundreds of these loitering munitions, guided by operators who have been training for years to strike advancing infantry and light armor. Unlike the deserts of Iraq, the terrain on Karg is compact and defensible. Every landing zone has been zeroed in by mortars and rockets. The American force, once landed, would be trapped. They would find themselves cut off from resupply, subjected to relentless barrages from the Iranian mainland, just a few miles away, and pinned down by a force that has no intention of fighting a conventional fair fight. The parallel to Russia's disastrous occupation of Snake Island is instructive. Holding a small island under the guns of the mainland is a suicide mission. Beyond the shores of Karg, the Iranian military has constructed a defensive architecture that renders a broader ground invasion of Iran the stuff of Pentagon fever dreams. The geography itself is a weapon. The Zagros mountain range forms a natural fortress, a rugged barrier that has broken the armies of empires for millennia. From Alexander the Great's grueling campaigns to Saddam Hussein's disastrous 1980 invasion, which stalled in those same mountains at the cost of tens of thousands of Iraqi lives. Any American ground force attempting to push from the coast into the interior would be forced to navigate narrow valleys and steep passes, terrain where Iran's light infantry and armored corps hold every advantage. The Iranian military does not need to meet the Americans head-on in the open desert. They will bleed them in the mountains using hit-and-run tactics, sniper teams, and improvised explosive devices that they have perfected over decades of asymmetric conflict. The Iranian military strategy is built on endurance and deterrence, not on matching the U.S. plane for plane or tank for tank. They have invested heavily in a layered defense that includes ballistic missiles capable of hitting every American base in the region, a fleet of naval vessels designed for swarm tactics, and a network of regional allies ready to open new fronts. If American boots touch Iranian soil, the response will not be limited to the battlefield. The Iranian military has the capability and the stated intent to target American assets across the Middle East, including the luxurious hotels in Gulf states where American officers are known to lodge. They will turn the region into an inferno, raising the cost of war so high that the American public, which has no appetite for another Vietnam-style quagmire, will demand an end to the bloodshed. Moreover, the Iranian military is prepared to capture American soldiers. Not just kill them, capture them. This is a crucial point often missed by Western analysts who obsess over kill ratios. The Iranian military's plan, as outlined by commanders, involves encircling American advance units, cutting their supply lines, and forcing surrenders. The imagery of American prisoners of war would be broadcast across the world, breaking the will of the American public and humiliating a superpower that is already teetering on the edge of political chaos. Brigadier General Ali Jahanshahi, commander of Iran's army ground force, has made it clear that any incursion will be more dangerous and costlier for the Americans than anything they have experienced since the Korean War. This is not bravado. This is the assessment of a military that has watched the U.S. struggle against lightly armed insurgents for 2 decades and knows that facing a cohesive national army on home territory is a completely different proposition. We will continue to monitor this developing situation as the world holds its breath. But one thing is certain. If Washington thinks this is going to be a quick war, they have never truly understood the land they are threatening to invade.
A helicopter evacuated dead or wounded Israeli soldiers to a hospital in Haifa, arriving from southern Lebanon after losses in clashes with Hezbollah, signaling the intensification of fighting on Israeli northern front. Video circulated online on March 31st, confirming reports of at least 3 additional helicopters transporting bodies or wounded, who continued to arrive at Rambam Hospital. Surveillance footage and live footage from the hospital captured the response, showing several Magen David Adom ambulances at night, and emergency staff rushing stretchers into the medical center, amid a flurry of emergency activities. Heavy military losses from the recent fierce clashes were reported, after Israel announced a ground invasion on March 26 into Lebanese territory. Israeli casualties reportedly mounted as hospitals in northern Israel filled up, prompting Netanyahu to consider a broader military invasion. Reports called it one of the deadliest single incidents for IDF forces since 2023, and Israeli misinformation did not explicitly refer to individuals as killed, or downplayed the casualty figures, and the news rarely made it outside. Geopolitical analyst Ben Norden, in his statement, described that Israel is destroying homes in Lebanon to occupy and colonize southern permanently. He said that they are repeating the same strategy as 1982 to 2000. Meanwhile, the Hezbollah resistance forces have repeatedly said that southern Lebanon has become a graveyard for the Zionist forces, and Hezbollah's surprise attacks and missiles are destroying the occupation forces, exhausting the enemy's strength one by one, both soldiers and officers. Lebanese media released a video on Tuesday. Radwan elite forces of Hezbollah have captured 28 Israeli soldiers and taken control of more than 30 Israeli checkpoints in the Galilee community. But local confirmation is ongoing. Wednesday morning doesn't start with coffee. A Shahed drone with its distinctive sound reached the British oil refinery Castrol in Erbil, Iraqi Kurdistan. Video showed a massive explosion at the facility, triggering a massive fire that engulfed warehouses and logistics materials, sending thick black smoke billowing into the city, which has become a key site for retaliation for the US-Israeli war on Iran. The facility, located in a strategic industrial area on Erbil-Mosul Road, is owned by Sardar Group, the exclusive distributor for the British lubricant brand, is part of BP Group that acquired Castrol in 2000. According to the latest information, the facility includes storage warehouses and operational offices. Kurdish media reported at least 2 strikes. While extinguishing the fire, the plant was again targeted by drone. The source described the damage as extensive, due to the highly flammable nature of the stored materials, while confirming that no staff on site were injured. This incident has heightened tensions and highlighted the attacks on energy infrastructure in the region, which are entirely fueled by US-Israeli war machine. The drone strike was allegedly carried out by operator of Iraqi resistance forces, Saraya Aliyah al-Dam, in Erbil, which has begun targeting foreign companies on Iraqi soil. The Iraqi resistance has declared a decisive response to any attack on Gaza, any threat on Iran, so every NATO and US facility in Iraq is now a target.
friend?
I'm good, Judge. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's always a great honor being on your show. And I'm a fan of your show, and I listen to it often.
What is life like in Tehran today? Do people go to work? Do they do shopping? Do students go to school? Do the police do their job? Does the fire department do theirs? Does the sanitation department do theirs?
The sanitation department actually does their work quite well, because last night I was moving around and I saw them working near where I live. The streets are clean, but actually, this is this period is the best time for the country to be waging war, because this is a national holiday. The Iranian New Year was 12 days ago. It's the first day of spring, Nowruz. And the country is closed for like 2 weeks. And so this is the second week of the holiday. Schools will open on Monday, and so will universities. And government agencies are sort of half open during the second week, meaning these days. And then next week they open. But under the circumstances next week, it'll be like during Corona, where schools and universities will be online, and government agencies, they will, I think, a lot of the employees will be working from home or from wherever they are.
Are people out in the streets? I mean, we're going to play a clip in a few minutes of Foreign Minister Arachi just amiably walking with large crowds in Tehran. But in terms of buying food, going to shops, buying clothing, putting fuel in your car, is that part of life normal?
Yes, that is all very normal, although in Tehran, because of the war and because of the New Year holiday, traffic is very light. Most shops are not open, but they will open on Monday. In other cities, though, it's very different, because a lot of people who've left Tehran they've gone for vacation, or they've gone to stay with family, depending on whether it's for vacation or it's because they want to be away from the airstrikes. But other cities are more crowded, and businesses are open, I would assume, in tourist cities. But in Tehran, the last 2 weeks, businesses have been closed like every other year. But before the New Year, many were closed because of the war. But we'll have to see how things evolve on Monday. I think it'll probably get more crowded. There'll be more businesses open. But again, it won't be normal because of the war.
We have a clip of Foreign Minister Arachi in the streets of Tehran last night. It's about 46 seconds long. Because of the system that we're using to communicate with each other between Tehran and New York City, you and I will not be able to see or hear it, but our viewers will. So Chris is going to play it now, and then I will read you the transcript of it so that you'll be familiar with what he says. He's walking through the streets. He has a hooded jacket on. He's recognized by a reporter. I don't know if he has security or not. They're not visible in the clip. He takes the hood off, he brushes his hair, and then he very happily answers the reporter's questions. Chris, cut number 23.
I feel like you wanted to be among the people in a different way. Why?
In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, I just came to lift my spirits. Seeing these people truly gives everyone a great sense of morale, and I am just a drop from among these people. I wanted to come among them, participate in this movement on the ground, lift my own spirits, and truly enjoy this unity and solidarity among the people.
So, how did you find it, Doctor?
It was excellent. It was excellent. One truly envies these people who, with so much motivation, passion, and such high spirits, are serving their country like this, protecting it, persevering, and maintaining social cohesion. May God give them all strength.
We grew up on a lot of these big brands that we knew, and
So here's the communication with Foreign Minister Arachi. The reporter says, I feel like you wanted to be among the people in a different way. Why? The foreign minister. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, I just came to lift my spirits. Seeing these people truly gives everyone a great sense of morale, and I am just a drop among these people. I wanted to come among them, participate in this movement on the ground, lift my own spirits, and truly enjoy this unity and solidarity among the people. Reporter. So how did you find it, doctor? Answer. The foreign minister. It was excellent. It was excellent. One truly envies these people who, with so much motivation, passion, and such high spirits, are serving their country like this, protecting it, preserving, and maintaining social cohesion. May God give them all strength. Is that consistent with your observations of the Iranian people? Or stated differently, how does Iran stay strong in the face of this horrific bombardment from the US and the Israelis?
You know, Judge, the best example I can give where no one can say that this is AI or propaganda is the first week of the war. Immediately after the initial airstrikes, people began to worry about the safety of the martyr Ayatollah Khamenei. And early next morning, it was declared that he and other senior people were martyred. Senior commanders were martyred. So for a week, we didn't have a leader. And in accordance with the Constitution, of course, there was a council, but still, we didn't have a leader. And people went to the streets every night and during the days, and in huge numbers. And they're doing it every night, by the way, till right now. Every night, I drive across the city to go like to a studio, and you could pass different groups, sometimes huge in the tens of thousands, sometimes just in a neighborhood, like 50 people, 100. It's just amazing. And so during that week, the country was completely calm. There were no queues or lines for gasoline. None of the supermarkets were full of people. No one was buying bread or anything else in an extraordinary way or out of fear. It was business as usual. The people kept the country moving forward, and the armed forces, of course, immediately began responding within less than an hour, if I'm not mistaken. So that just shows the high degree, the high degree of legitimacy of the Islamic Republic, whether it's antagonists like that or not. And every night these people are on the streets, every night across Tehran. And Judge, 3 nights ago, I think, very near where I am right now, a walking distance from here, in one of those local gatherings near a square called Artish Square, they fired a missile at this gathering, and a woman was
Revolutionary salute.
So they continue to fire missiles at gatherings, as they did on another one that I attended, where another woman was murdered, and I think I told you this on this show. So it's basically a walking distance from where I am, maybe a 20-minute walk, where she was killed just 3 nights ago. But even though that happened, last night, the square was more crowded than it was the night when she was murdered.
Wow. The American Defense Department, the Secretary of Defense, who calls himself the Secretary of War, a lot of people call him a lot of things, which I can't repeat on air, claims that the Supreme Leader is injured and disfigured. Can you comment on that?
No, I don't think that there's anything wrong with him at all. He is well protected, and for obvious reasons, just as the Speaker of Parliament has also been well protected. And right now, all of our leaders are being taken special care of because the Israeli regime assassinates. They're good at assassinations. That's the only thing they're good at. They're good at bombing homes and assassinating. They've been doing it since JFK was killed, I suppose. But he is in charge. And this is one of the myths that Trump is trying to, what Trump and his people are trying to promote, which is absolutely wrong. He keeps talking about he keeps claiming that he's talking to people in Iran. Nothing is different today from what it was a month and a half ago. Right now, we have a new leader, the chair of the Supreme National Security Council, the replacement for Dr. Larijani has been chosen. Everyone all the positions are occupied. So the affairs of state are carried out just as they were a year and a half ago. So whoever wants to communicate with the Iranian government or with anyone in the Iranian government, it is done just as it was a month and a half ago. There are no people who are carrying out their own separate agenda, and everything works within the framework of the Supreme National Security Council.
Is the Iranian government negotiating either directly or indirectly with the Americans, as President Trump has been claiming consistently for the past week or so?
I can say with 100% confidence that no negotiations are taking place. No negotiations have taken place either. What does happen is that messages are exchanged, sometimes through Oman, now through Pakistan. That is not new. This has been going on for many years, or from, let's say, Russia or some other third party. Sometimes the messages are direct, through the Swiss embassy or other means, because sometimes when there's a concern that third parties may be pursuing their own interests, and there's something that's they must make sure that it's passed along with precision. Sometimes the messages are sent directly, but there are no negotiations taking place, and the Iranians have no interest in any ceasefire at all.
About 5 minutes before we came on air, so about 20 minutes ago, President Trump said Iran's president has asked for a ceasefire, but the United States wants the Strait of Hormuz to be open first.
Here's a list of things to know before you look for cheaper car insurance. First, every company may ask for
Is this a credible statement?
No, not at all. The president has not made such a proposal or request or anything like that. The conditions that the Iranian Supreme National Security Council, which he is the head of, those are very much the current demands, and they're not going to change those demands. The only thing that can bring an end to this war is that if the facts on the ground change, and some things they'll be solved without needing any negotiations. For example, the Strait of Hormuz, the Iranians have changed its status, and that will remain the case permanently. And the Iranians have also discovered that a lot of the US assets in the Persian Gulf that were used against Iran were brought to Iran by ships. So it's not just about importing or exporting oil or other goods, it's also about Iran's national security. So the issue of the Strait of Hormuz, thanks to Trump, has been permanently changed, and the Iranians will ensure that that remains the case.
Isn't it bitterly ironic? The president has dropped his claim for a change of government, he calls regime change, in Tehran. He has dropped his claim for the surrender of nuclear enriched material. He has dropped his claim for a self-destruction by Iran of its own ballistic missiles. Now his demand is opening the Strait of Hormuz, which was open before he started his war.
Yes, but Judge, you forget where you are. It's still morning. Till night, his objectives could change 3 or 4 times. So maybe he will have those objectives by nighttime. Who knows? But the only thing, though, that is important for Iran is that the aggression against the country is defeated, and to make sure that it is never repeated again. And the Iranians are not buying this notion that things are about over. In fact, the belief here is that escalation is on its way, that a major assault by the Americans will happen, and there will be a lot, and that the belief is that the Americans will start increasing attacks, and the Israeli regime on vital infrastructure. And we've already seen that happen. And these attacks, of course, are fully coordinated. So the Israelis are now bombing. They bombed a key pharmaceutical factory, which is a crime against humanity. They've been bombing key industries. They've even been bombing poultry farms across the country. So you can imagine they're just striking at anything that they think can hurt ordinary Iranians. And of course, the Iranians are going to retaliate. And I think that today, probably, and tomorrow, the Iranians are going to be hitting hard in response. But I think it's quite possible that on Friday, because you have a 3-day weekend and the markets will be closed for 3 days, I think there's a good chance that Trump will escalate during that period.
The president is going to address the country tonight at 9 o'clock Eastern time, New York City time. Last night, he told a reporter in an offhanded way, I think this will be over in 2 or 3 weeks. The troops will be home. So some people expect him to declare a fanciful victory. And some people think that if he announces that the troops are coming home, it's just a subterfuge to lull the Iranians into a false sense of security, as he attempted to do in June with the negotiations and in February with the negotiations. You are a student of American politics as well as literature, as well as Iranian politics. What do you expect? What do you think the Iranians expect, the Iranian government, to hear from President Trump tonight?
Well, Judge, you are the expert, and I would never dare act as an expert in front of you. But I don't think that the Iranians have any idea what he's going to say, because as I was joking earlier, it's morning where you are now, and by tonight, who knows what is going to change, and even if he says something tonight, well, who knows what he's going to be saying tomorrow or the day after. I think in Iran, they don't really take note of what he says anymore. We've already seen him carry out deception multiple times. 9 months ago, we were negotiating, and then it turned out that all along he was deceiving Iran, and he was planning for a blitzkrieg attack with Netanyahu. And then before this war, we were negotiating. The foreign minister of Oman said there was progress, and then again, he carried out war. Nothing that he says will have any impact in Tehran. In Tehran, the only thing that is important is that this war must end in a way where we feel secure, and that we feel that we will never be attacked again, and that reparations are made, and Iran will make sure that these Arab countries in the Persian Gulf that have been complicit, that if the US is not going to pay for it, that they will. And as I said, the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz, it will be under a new type of management. And of course, Iran's allies across the region, they too have to be safe and secure.
Wow. Professor Morandi, thank you very much, my dear friend. May God be with you and your family and all your students and all your friends. Thank you very much for your intellectual honesty and personal courage, as always. We'll look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you, Mohammed. God bless.
seems to be more interested in military, and the military is even talking about diplomacy too. What in the heck is going on here? How does all this work out? And where in the world are we going? We have with us today, trying to make some sense out of this. First-time guest on our show here, Dennis Fritz is a retired Air Force Command Sergeant Major and a former director of the Eisenhower Media Network, and now a senior fellow. Dennis, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here.
Well, Colonel, it's my honor and pleasure to be with you. Thanks for having me.
I really appreciate having this Master Chief dynamic, this kind of on-the-ground stuff. We have a lot of officers here and there, but sometimes officers, we don't get all the picture of what's the trend, the granularity at the groundwork. And so I'm really eager to have your viewpoints on some of this stuff as a new voice on the show. So thanks for showing up. We really appreciate it.
Well, Colonel, just see me as your Sergeant Major, okay? And as you know, 80% of the force is enlisted, and I'm a representative that enlisted force that make up the armed forces.
That is awesome. I'm eager to get into this. Well, let's just jump right into it here. First of all, on I think it was Monday, President Trump put this kind of a new ultimatum out there where he said that he's going to be blowing up completely and obliterating electric grid, power plants, and oil wells in Carg Island, and maybe the desalination plant. Pretty serious. But he opened it up on something that sounded a little bit more optimistic. The U.S. is in serious discussions with a new and more reasonable regime to end our military operations in Iran. Great progress has been made, but if for any reason the deal is not shortly reached, which it probably will be, and if the Hormuz Strait is not immediately open for business, then all of those bad things happen. So, kind of first of all, I just kind of like your view on that. It seems like President Trump has been making a number of kind of bold statements. There's a market reaction, and then there's not a lot of action on the ground, and then another statement, and then kind of reaction, and then this one here. Do you see this as more of him trying to just calm markets and calm people, or do you think this really represents an opening diplomatically?
Let me just first say, as you know, his background is business. And so I'll be honest with you, and quite candidly, I think his first line of thinking is calming the business world, calming the market. The next question I would ask, who is advising him? When you talk about, we're looking at diplomacy, and I think it's this way of trying to get out. But when you start talking about obliterating infrastructure in regards to water, electricity, Colonel, as you know, we're looking at Geneva Convention violations, actually breaking the law. And that disturbs me. And it only, just from hearing the words of Hegseth, that maybe he's advising him and giving him this ill-advised information on how he should convey, his message. And so I will tell you, from whether it be Hegseth, who I think is inexperienced, but who I really, really lay the blame on is, to quite frank with you, our chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the other fellow members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the combatant commanders, because they know better. And if I get quite candid with you, it really hurts me more so when that chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff happened to come from my service, a fellow airman. And it's very disappointing. President Trump, he has no experience in diplomacy, no experience in world affairs when it comes to something so critical. And so as I stated earlier, as being your Sergeant Major and a representative of those 80% of the force, it disappoints me that our president is playing games, if you want to so-called say, is to calm the market. It's about, we should be trying to find diplomacy to save lives, to save those, if you look over my shoulder, deadly betrayer, the 4,500 military men and women that died on a lie from the Iraq war. And as you look at it now, it breaks my heart that we're entering into another deadly betrayal with us going into Iraq. We've already had some deaths. And if you start talking about putting troops on the ground, then we're looking at a devastating deadly betrayal. And we can talk about that much later. But I just really think it's the president that truly does not understand how important this is and how catastrophic this is, and be so-called calming the market, which I do feel that's what's in his head.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because at a press conference a couple of days ago, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was asked that by a reporter to say, hey, where are you on those things that the president said in his Truth Social?
General, the president wrote yesterday that the U.S. might destroy Iran's electricity generating plants and oil wells. Those are his words before ending this operation. Is there a way to do either of those things without seriously harming civilians?
Thanks for the question. We're always thinking about those considerations and develop options to be able to mitigate those risks pursuant to the normal practices that we do in the military.
I mean, what the hell did he just say? We're always thinking about risk, mitigate, pursuant, and we think about it. Did he answer the question?
Absolutely not. And let me just first say, what a great question by the media. We're finally maybe getting them to get to the job of what they should be doing and getting the American people answers. But what a sad answer. But Colonel, we should have known and expected this from early on in the administration when Hegseth came in and started firing all the JAGs. And if you go back and look at in history, I am on record of saying at the time that he's firing all the JAGs because he wants to get those legal expert advisors in place that will support what he's doing right now. Because as you know, that's why we have JAGs in every organization. To be able
let me just ask, for those who may not know, a JAG is a JAG, Judge Advocate General. Can you just real briefly tell us, for the audience, what is a JAG and what was the significance of him getting rid of them?
And I'm glad you mentioned that, Colonel, because I always try to speak in language that our audience will understand. So thanks for stopping me right there. And for your audience, I will say, just to break it down, a JAG is a legal officer who is in most units, especially when we're going to war, to advise commanders, if you will, on what is legal and what is not legal. And that's why you have lawyers to make sure they can interpret international law for our commanders, not only in headquarters, but in the field. And it's important that we do that so we don't violate international law and putting our military men and women in a position where they're committing war crimes. And I will tell you now, that is exactly what we are doing. And to hear that response by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, I got to be honest with you, Colonel, as an enlisted man, as I stated, I advised 4-star generals the last 5 years of my career. And I was always candid with them. And I'm going to be candid now. This is a time when our chairman, along with his fellow Joint Chiefs and the combatant commanders, they're going to have to find a way to break away from this. Now, because this is a disappointment to me as an enlisted man. Very disappointing to see that our senior military officer in uniform can't give a straight answer on the violations and probably Geneva Convention violations that are possibly really taking place now and can in the future. Now, let me just say this for your audience too, Colonel. From the enlisted side of the house, from the time of basic military training, we're taught the law of armed conflict. We're taught about the Geneva Conventions. And likewise, from your perspective, whether it be ROTC or from the service academies, you were taught that. Likewise, it's almost like we're following the tracks of the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, because of the fact, we also know that's very alarming to me. The first attack, the first day, which disappointingly happened on my birthday, when we, whether accidentally or on purpose, hit that school. Well, we all know too, we don't hit schools, we don't hit hospitals, we don't hit residential areas. And we know for a fact that the IDF was doing that in Gaza. And it seemed like we're just, believe it or not, following them. And we can already say we've already followed them into combat. Just ask Rubio.
Well, yeah, and in fact, speaking, we're gonna hear from him in a minute. But first of all, let's go with Rubio's predecessor, one of his predecessors, Mike Pompeo, who seems to take. This is from Sunday. He said, "Hey, we're basically going to take these things that President Trump has been saying, all these military things we've been doing, and this destruction and all this kind of thing that he's been talking ad nauseum from the podium and from Caroline Leavitt, et cetera." He says, "We're going to take that and we're going to leverage it into diplomacy."
But you also move them there for security troops safe that are in the region. So there's lots of radar systems, counter air systems that are being moved into place as well. You do move it there for a purpose of leverage and negotiation. Mr. Witkoff's position is much stronger when there's a bunch of Marines sitting on your doorstep. This is not time to pull back. They still have systems. You can see they're still able to fire rockets, missiles, not only from the Houthis and from Hezbollah in Lebanon, but directly from Iran, threatening our allies in the region, the Gulf states, the Emirates. We need to take down this system entirely.
So let me ask you, I mean, after now a full month, now we're into the second month now of this war. So all the things we thought was going to bring a quick resolution to this didn't. We were in the middle of diplomacy already for the second time in 1 year when we claimed we were trying to find a negotiated settlement and didn't. Then upon what basis and how much are these Marines going to help with cause now to have a new round of diplomacy that has any chance of working?
Listen, Colonel, I don't think that's going to help whatsoever. And, he mentioned the name Witkoff, and let's throw in Kushner there. Where is Secretary Rubio truly in all this?
That's a good question.
That's the big question. Where is he? He's trying to run off and be a national security counsel, and then he's trying to be the Secretary of State. And where is he, in all this diplomacy? But you mentioned something, alluded to something I just want to bring up. I got to be honest with you and tell your audience, for the time being, they can say all they want to say. I think diplomacy is out of the question based on what you just said there. We've been in diplomatic negotiations twice already. And what did that get the Iranians? Nothing but bombs. Nothing but bombs. And so I think it's prudent for them to be very cautious. And I truly think as you hear them coming out, I'm not going to call it rhetoric. I call it true statements. Any diplomacy is going to be done on their terms. And I truly believe that. So the president can say, hey, we're almost there. And once again, as a military man, retired man, I must say, unfortunately and sadly, we can't trust our commander in chief. And so when we talk about diplomacy right now, currently, I think diplomacy is dead on arrival. And I think it's our administration that's coming out with this rhetoric. And in regards to Marines and even the 82nd Airborne Division trying to play that card, they've already told us they're ready and waiting. And what I would tell your audience, I always tell folks, you can listen to us so-called analysts and former military men and women, but also ask you to use your critical thinking. I want you to think about this when we talk about putting in all these Marines in the 82nd Airborne Division. Colonel, you think about your time in Afghanistan. We went in and put all the troops in there. And guess what? We're talking about Afghanistan is working with rifles and improvised explosive and so forth. And look, unfortunately, where we are right now, the Taliban's still in charge. You look at Iraq, 4,500 military men and women, hundreds of thousands wounded for life in Iraq. Now, you're talking about putting a few Marines in the 82nd Airborne Division on land in Iran, which is more sophisticated, more powerful. Their weapon systems are something I guess we just didn't expect. We should have expected that. And oh, by the way, they've been waiting for us for decades. And so trying to use the Marines and the 82nd Airborne Division to scare them or use that as a tactic to scare them in diplomacy, I feel confident you put me on record, that's not going to work.
Well, apparently somebody else who put themselves on record who's contradicting you on that is somebody who doesn't have a great track record, and that is yesterday at a press conference, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth.
As far as President Trump and boots on the ground, I don't understand why the base, which they have already, they understand, wouldn't have faith in his ability to execute on this. Look at his track record of pursuing peace through strength, America first outcomes. What he's simply saying, and it's exactly true, and I've said from this podium too, we're not going to foreclose any option. You can't fight and win a war if you tell your adversary what you are willing to do or what you are not willing to do, to include boots on the ground. Our adversary right now thinks there are 15 different ways we could come at them with boots on the ground. And guess what? There are. Not to. But if anybody has internalized the lessons of Iraq and Afghanistan as the first one, President Trump, to call them out for what they are, he's not going to repeat those lessons.
You talked about that book that's over your shoulder there about the Iraq war. It doesn't sound like those lessons were internalized by anybody here. And I also think that something you said right before we went to that clip is really important, and it illustrates how little understanding apparently the secretary has. Because in the Iraq war, I think that the height of that, we had 180,000 Americans. I believe that's what we had at the height of that. And in the Afghanistan war, it was about 140,000 U.S. and NATO troops there. And now we will at some point have 20,000. There's 10 about right now and another 10 about coming. That's just a tiny fraction in a country 4 times bigger than the country of Iran and all of the mountains of Afghanistan. Literally, it's the worst of everything in the last 2 wars. And we're going in thinking that's going to scare somebody on the Iranian side.
But Colonel, what we have to look at too, what we just said about Afghanistan and Iraq, you're talking about a more weaponized country than those two. Think about that for a moment. And we're talking about putting troops, and look at this. Look how long it took, how many years we were in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the lives that we lost. And really, as I stated a few minutes ago, if you look at Afghanistan, the Taliban are still in charge. If you look at Iraq right now, we had to get everybody out of Iraq, citizens, to include the largest embassy in the world that we built, that we had to evacuate. Now, give me a break when you think you're going to go in and take over Iran. That is not going to happen. And I tell you, that's going to be the most devastating war that we've ever seen if we attempt to do that. Now, let me just tell you something else, Colonel, when you mentioned about, deadly betrayal, when we talk about there was no plan, we're really, unfortunately, they're trying to duplicate what we did in Iraq. And we all know how bad that was. That's what gets me. If you take a look at, we're going to go in with shock and awe. Okay, that's what we've been doing. Then we're going to bring in the troops. We're going to be welcome arms. It's going to be a cakewalk. There is somebody inexperienced right now, to include Hexelf, that's giving the president bad advice because we're making mistakes worse than what we did in Iraq and Afghanistan against a more powerful, I won't say enemy, but adversary, if you will, but in military terms, enemy, an enemy who is waiting and ready for us. And so we're repeating the same playbook that we did in Iraq. How can I say that, Dennis Fritz? Because I saw the playbook. I just want to share something with you, Colonel. When we talk about deadly betrayal, well, how did I come about that? For you history buffs out there, you probably remember the name Daniel Ellsberg, the Pentagon Papers in regards to the Vietnam War. Well, after I retired, in my so-called protest of us going into Iraq, as you know, Colonel, an officer, which I would hope that some of these general officers would do, can resign in protest, but an enlisted person cannot. But I can, if I'm eligible to retire, to do that. And I did that. But Lord and behold, I did that because of the fact I didn't understand why were we going into Iraq. And when the troops were coming to me, which I had credibility with the troops, I had no answer for them. And I couldn't see myself just sending them off to something that I didn't understand and couldn't explain. And all of a sudden, Lord and behold, I got recruited back to the Pentagon as a civilian to work on a project, I guess because it was my relationship at the time with the current, at the time, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who I worked for at 2 major commands. And I became part of a project, what we will call the Pentagon Papers of the Afghanistan and Iraq wars. And you heard back in the Iraq war, we so-called cherry-picked intelligence to justify war, where it was an individual I was working with at the time, or working for, by the name of Doug Feith. He was the number 3 guy in the Pentagon, the main guy that was pushing the war, on behalf of the Department of Defense.
Oh, who worked for.
Pardon me?
Yeah, it's fascinating. I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah, Doug Feith. And believe it or not, Colonel, as I was working on that project, we were declassifying all the pre-planning documents that got us into the Iraq war and Afghanistan wars. And then from that project, Doug Feith decided that he was going to cherry pick everything that we declassify in order to write a book to lie and justify that war that he got us into. And so seeing that and all the mistakes that were made, I went right behind him and wrote my own book, as you see, Deadly Betrayal. But you will understand this. When I sent it back for review, they redacted as much as they could out of there. But they knew I was on the declassification team, so I knew what was not considered classified and not classified. But I say that to say this. That's what allows me to be able to say they're trying to use the same playbook that we did in Iraq, and it's going to fail, and it's going to fail miserably, and we're going to get a lot of people killed and maimed for life. As I was listening as I was, before I came on, I was listening on my phone to Scott Ritter. And what you must understand, Colonel, and your audience, is that once I left the Pentagon out of the Secretary of Defense Policy, I was asked by the Air Force, there was a 2007 Washington Post story of, unfortunately, how badly we were treating our war wounded at the old Army Wounded Warrior facility, the old Walter Reed that was in Washington, D.C. And the Air Force asked me to go over as a civilian when I retired then, because I had fussed and went out fighting about we better take care of our returning military members. Well, there was a Washington Post story about our folks returning back from the battlefield, living in molded rooms and unsanitized conditions. And so I went over and I became the Air Force's representative for our war wounded. And then I went on to be a contract program manager for the entire DoD program. Well, why do I say that? When we talk about the deaths that are going to happen, something I heard Scott Ritter say, what our audience must understand, when our government is putting our folks in harm's way, not only are we putting in jeopardy of being killed, maimed for life, but the psychological portion of it. You have a lot of Iraqi veterans, a lot of Afghan veterans right now walking around that are just, be quite frank with you, dead mentally, if you will. And we're going to cause that again off of a Secretary of Defense that's saying we do diplomacy with bombs. How ignorant is that? If you think you're going to threaten Iran because we're going to continue to bomb them, as you know, Colonel, they fought Iraq for 8 years, and they're going to continue to do that. And that's why I say, and you can put me on record, diplomacy is dead on arrival for the time being.
Yeah, and that's and of course it needs to be resurrected pretty soon, but that's going to require some significant changes on our part. Interesting here, Gary, this is something that I just hit my phone. It's actually from Monday. If you can look this up, it's on the publication The Hill, and the headline is "Graham to Trump." I am not making this up. This is not a joke. Graham to Trump: wind down Iran war, wind up efforts for peace deal. And I'm thinking, you have got to bloody be kidding me. Lindsey Graham, who was the biggest cheerleader in this whole thing for months, talking about how we had to go in there and we had to obliterate all this stuff. And now that he sees it's not working, now he has the audacity to tell the president of the United States publicly, you know what, Mr. President, you need to wind this down. That was one day before that. Let's see, I think I even still have it up here. This is what he put on Tuesday morning. Where he said all those countries that can't get jet fuel because of the Strait of Hormuz, like the United Kingdom, which relies on, he insults them a bunch of stuff. He says, you know what, you guys are going to have to be on your own because the hard part is already done. Go get your own oil. And then he says to France, you wouldn't let our planes load up to Israel for our supplies to go over French territory. You've been very unhelpful with respect to the butcher of Iran, who has been successfully eliminated. The USA will remember this. So it looks like he's trying to get out of here. And there's the information, one more thing here from the Wall Street Journal. Also yesterday, Trump tells aides he's willing to end the war without reopening the Hormuz. Now, that's coming the day after Lindsey Graham said that reported in The Hill here. What in the world do you make out of this just nonsense?
Taxes was chasing updates and getting nowhere.
I got to tell you, Colonel, when I heard that, I was shocked. But then I thought about it. I said, well, I shouldn't be shocked. And you talk about Lindsey Graham. Let's go back decades between he and Bibi Netanyahu. This is something they've been wanting for decades. Now, as I think about it more a little deeply, I say, well, wait a minute. Who is Lindsey Graham's biggest advisor on pushing him to say the things that he say? And the first thing that came to mind was Bibi Netanyahu. It seems as though Lindsey Graham spent more time in Israel than he does in the state of South Carolina. Now, oh, by the way, when you mentioned the things about you talked about the other countries, how about the statement, last week when he was talking about, hey, I'm going back to South Carolina and tell all the people in South Carolina they need to send their sons and daughter over there to fight. Well, you know why he changed his mind? I think you know this already, Colonel. Israel is being hit, and they're being hit hard. The media is being censored over in Israel. Not only their media, but our media that's over there are being censored. And I can tell you, the only thing I can think of is that Bibi Netanyahu and other Israelis are telling Lindsey Graham, hey, you better get to the president. We don't know how much more of this we can take. And I really believe that. You imagine what you just stated. Lindsey Graham, I thought, listen, I do a lot of TikTok and social media. I thought, was you ready for this? I thought it was fake news until I realized he actually said that. So that must tell you something, that what they've been trying to hide with the destruction that's happening in Israel. And not only that, unfortunately, the Gulf nations. Now, people, sometimes with the rhetoric we have, they may say, well, why is Iran hitting the Gulf nations? Well, they're doing it because, unfortunately, we have people there. We have equipment there. We have infrastructure there. So they're defending themselves. As you were here, does Israel have a right to defend themselves? Well, does Iran have a right to defend themselves? And that's exactly what they're doing in a war that they didn't start. And let me just go back and I said, when I mentioned about the playbook earlier, Colonel, when I was talking about something, we're following the playbook of Israel. Well, guess what? When we attacked Iraq, you'll remember this probably. They said, what is, I think it was Bush's, what is his philosophy? What is his doctrine? We came up with this so-called thing to attack Iraq, anticipatory self-defense. Well, we got that from Israel, mowing the lawn, mowing the grass. We're going to attack before they attack us. Well, Rubio told us we're continuing that playbook, anticipatory self-defense. We had to go because of the fact there was a so-called imminent threat that Iran was going to attack us. But let me just put it on record. Iran never attacked us. We attacked them, and now they're defending themselves. And Lindsey Graham has found out the way, unfortunately, our government has found out that Iran is nothing to play with. But sadly, they put this on the backs of our men and women in the armed forces. And it's me, a representative of these 80% of those men and women that's going to go in harm's way. I'm here to speak up for them and tell them, please forgive me, but that is low down dirty on our so-called Secretary of Defense, our so-called Commander-in-Chief, and the so-called those senior general officers that would allow this to happen, to have another deadly betrayal.
And look, it's just, we're not finished yet. It's continuing on. But now that you see, when you see Lindsey Graham publicly saying we need to get out, then that tells you that they recognize that this is an unwinnable situation here. Problem is, Iran recognizes it's an unwinnable situation for us. And now then that puts them in the driver's seat. And here is Abbas Araghchi. This is also yesterday. He said, I received messages from U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff directly as before, and this does not mean that we are in negotiations. He said, there's no truth to the claim that there are negotiations with any party in Iran. All the messages are conveyed through the foreign ministry or received by it, and there are communications between security agencies, he said, adding that Tehran has not made any decision about negotiating with Washington, as it has reservations about them. Well, no kidding. You talk about the playbook that didn't work, and you talk about the problems with the Secretary of War and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Commander-in-Chief, but there's also the diplomatic side with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and he's more of a Secretary of War than he is Secretary of State. But now then, we don't have anybody that knows how to talk the language of diplomacy, actual diplomacy, which means take and give. And now then they're in a position to where they may not even negotiate with this. What do you make of that?
Well, as I stated earlier, Colonel, like I said, put me on record. Diplomacy is dead on arrival right now. It's not going to happen. And right now, as you stated, and I think I stated previously as well, the cards are all in Iran's hand. And they've already put out their so-called, not 15-point, but literally 3 points, that, hey, before we come to the table, we're going to put everything to our advantage. In other words, which we know was something we can't do, we want you out of here, if you will. We want you and your bases out of here. We also, hey, we want you to pay us back. We want money for what you've done. In the meantime, what we're going to do, we're going to charge for you to get through the Strait of Hormuz in the meantime. So it's all right now in the hands of the Iranians. And so that's why I say for the time being, diplomacy is off the table. And let me just mention this, Colonel. I'm going to boldly and say this. because it's factual. It's not opinion, it's not assumption, but a fact. I heard some pundit last night, I think it was on CNN, and was saying the exact same thing we're saying now. Well, wait a minute. You're trying to tell me you trust the so-called regime against our president? Well, yes, I do. Because we've known that from the beginning of this war, from the start of the war, our administration, our government, who we trust and believe in, has been telling us nothing but a pack of lies. They can't even get their lies straight as an administration. And so I tend to right now to believe, because it only makes sense, that the Iranians, the cards are in their hands right now. They have proven they can withstand our so-called version of the shock and awe in this particular conflict with Iran.
Well, I'll tell you, Chief, let's let people make up their own mind about who they should believe. I've shown you True Socials from President Trump. I've shown you the Secretary of War. I've shown you the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Let's take a look at the other side of this. That's one of the things we like to do on our channel here, is to let both sides have their say, and then people can make up their own decisions, right? So here, let's take a look. First of all, Pete Hegseth was talking specifically about boots on the ground and how that's supposed to scare Iran. Not quite working out that way. This is the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, who's saying, marking the 1 month mark of the war, the Parliament Speaker dares the U.S. to go in on a ground invasion. When you look under the further of it, it says the enemy openly sends, he's talking about us, messages of negotiations and dialogue while secretly planning a ground assault. The Kalibaf wrote in a lengthy statement referring to the reports of the allegations that the Pentagon is preparing for weeks of a ground operation. The conservative parliament speaker warned that Tehran's forces were preparing for a possible U.S. ground invasion, writing, "Our men are waiting for the American soldiers to enter by land to set them on fire and punish their regional forces forever." Kalibaf also dismissed ongoing diplomatic signals from Washington, invoking a religious phrase in Arabic, which roughly translates to, quote, "Never will we accept humiliation," to characterize Iran's response to what he described as the American 15-point wish list that amounted to nothing more than a demand for surrender, which he's not going to. Abbas Araghchi previously said to an NBC News report a week or so ago, when they said, what do you think about this ground invasion, thinking that he's going to be worried. And he says, oh, no, we're ready for that. Bring it on. What do you make of this? Is that just empty bluster, or is there something to it?
Well, Colonel, I think it's something to it. As I mentioned, they've had decades to plan for this. And if we look back, as we stated earlier, when we talk about, think about Afghanistan again, think about Iraq again, think about what we had to do. We were battling the insurgency in Iraq. Now we're talking about a bona fide military. So I honestly, I take them for their word. And of course, there's going to be some rhetoric involved, but mostly I take them for the word. And let me just comment on something you said earlier, Colonel. I love what you said when you said, hey, listen, we like to give both sides and then let our audience make up their own mind. And I agree with that 100%, as I mentioned earlier, because we have so-called analysts and others that have seen it and got the T-shirt. We can sit up here and talk. But what I love about what you're doing and others like you're giving your audience another opportunity to hear another side versus the rhetoric and the punishment we hear on mainstream media. So I applaud you for what you're doing and to ensure that your audience have another opportunity to hear alternative views, alternative analysts, so that they can make and do their own critical thinking and make their own decisions of how they want to either support or not support this war. And so thank you for doing that and making that that comment about that. But no, I do take the Iranians at their word that they're ready and waiting. But of course, as stated earlier, you will have some rhetoric on both sides.
And let's just take a look at further about that. That's you mentioned a little bit of this a minute ago, but one of the ambassadors, Iranian ambassadors, was asked earlier this week, what are the conditions that they would enter, thinking that it's going to be, some kind of almost like the Kovalev there said, the Speaker of the Parliament, that basically you're offering so far as just to surrender. Those are terms you're offering. Our terms are a little different.
The lasting peace be established. This is the first and most important issue for us. And along with that is the issue of punishing the aggressor. This is also important. Along with that, they should give us compensation. Then, yes, there is the issue of lifting sanctions and recognizing our fundamental rights in the areas of enrichment and nuclear energy and other matters that we have. Yes, American bases and the American presence in the region are detrimental to the countries in the region. We saw that the Americans and American bases did not create security for the region. Rather, they created more insecurity. We ourselves, the countries of the region, must come and create a collective indigenous security arrangement with each other.
So I didn't hear much about him talking about Iran surrendering there. In fact, it sounded to me like he was almost offering Washington terms of surrender. You're going to do what we say. What do you make of that?
And Colonel, spot on for you showing that. That was the point I was trying to make. Our 15 point versus their 3 points of sanctions relief, getting out of our part of the world, and finally compensation for the destruction that you've done. And they know that we're not going to abide with that. And so that's why exactly, they're not going to abide by what we said, surrender. They're not going to do that. And so once again, Colonel, I must say, diplomacy is dead on arrival. It's not going to happen. And so, at least for the time being, so I think we're in trouble. And I think, let's go back to Lindsey Graham again. I think he knows that we're in trouble. And that's why, I mean, Colonel, I must say how shocked I was. I must say it again, of Lindsey Graham, the biggest warmonger in Senate other than John McCain that we had.
Wait, but you guys see the biggest warmonger with a little Disneyland thing in his hand. I mean, what's that all about? I'm sorry, I had to point that out.
Well, maybe Disneyland softened him. Oh, let me just be careful.
Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah, Danny, that's the Little Mermaid bubble wand, please.
Yeah. Well, let me be honest. Let me be accurate about it. Thank you, Gary, for correcting me on that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what softened him up to make him say this. But you talk about bringing pressure. Let me show you some other pressure points on the president here, which may have precipitated this sudden desire to end this without even worrying about the Strait of Hormuz. And that is this one here, the price of gasoline, which is only going up. And you see it's gone up from February, the end of February to the current time here, $1.05 a gallon. Now the average is up over $4, first time since 2022. And the fastest rise that we've had apparently on record, according to some reports. And that is not surprisingly translating into some negative numbers for President Trump. 59% overall disapprove. Foreign policy, 62% disapprove, and specifically on Iran, 64% disapprove. And because of all these rising prices in gas and everything else, inflation is also going up, and you see 71% of people disapprove there. President Trump doesn't appear to have a lot of leverage here, and the Iranians seem to know it. Who can stay this course the longest?
Hey, let me just mention this, Colonel. When we talk about us not having a plan, listen, the Iranians have a strategy, and they told us this strategy for the longest. They were going to close the Strait of Hormuz. They told us they were going to attack anywhere where we are. Now, I guess we didn't believe them and we didn't listen. Now, this is when it's going to hit home, but I want to just characterize something. You know, we talk about the economy. We talk about the midterm elections, how this may change and Trump may have to back down because of the midterm elections. You know, we talk about the gas prices, and that's going to translate into food prices as well. You know, we're going to see that in the future as well. This could absolutely destroy our economy, to be quite frank with you. And then the world economy, just from there are other countries that are suffering more than we are. We're actually suffering right now, but it's going to slowly hit us. But what disturbs me most, Colonel, is that we talk about the economy. We talk about midterm elections. That may be the thing to change the tide, to make us maybe really, really go for diplomacy. But how sad that is, that's going to be the thing that changes versus the death and destruction that is happening right now. Whether it be the military men and women on our side that have died. Listen, I'm always quick, and I'm reminded of this, to think about the innocent. Let's look at Libya. Let's look at Iraq. Now let's look at Iran. The innocent women and children and men that are dying in the so-called disguise of freedom and democracy. They are dying. So instead of trying on our side of the house to stop this war and to get to diplomacy, we're talking about economy, which could be detrimental, and we're talking about midterm elections versus the death and destruction that we're causing. Following the diplomacy of the Secretary of Defense, which I refuse to call the Secretary of the War, but I guess he's fitting the image of Secretary of the War. But instead of using true diplomacy to stop the death and destruction, we're using diplomacy, as he so stated, with bombs. How sad.
Well, it unfortunately is. I was just looking here at the current number of what's being officially reported anyway, and I don't know where these other two came from. Apparently, there's been 15 U.S. troops that have been confirmed as killed in action, and 332 have been wounded in action, 10 still remaining hospitalized. Yeah, that didn't move anybody. And now that here we're talking about potentially sending some more in, but one wonders if because of these pressure points, if Trump is now thinking about not sending them in. I certainly hope that's the case. But here's the thing I want to point out with this is also in yesterday's Wall Street Journal. Trump is telling Gates he's willing to end this without even worrying about reopening the Hormuz, which may mean that he's going to forego this suicidal attempt to put troops on the ground to do anything. Here's the problem with that, though, is that the Iranian side is going to have a high price even to go and open up the Strait of Hormuz, as Professor from the University of Tehran, Morandi, said here.
Iran has to make sure that the facts on the ground change. So these Arab family dictatorships in the Persian Gulf, which have no popular legitimacy, they cannot be allowed to be a platform to murder Iranians in the future. And they will have to pay reparations. So they have to behave like normal countries. And also Iran's allies across the region, which are being targeted by the Zionist regime and the Americans, they have to feel safe and secure. The Zionist regime had a ceasefire with Lebanon. They were violating it every day and murdering people every day. In the case of Gaza, they've been violating the ceasefire even, to with greater deadly results. That's not acceptable. So the facts on the ground have to change. The Iranians have to feel assured that in future their sovereignty will be respected. And a few words by Trump or a piece of paper with his signature means nothing to us after what has happened.
So, I mean, who's to blame any country for not trusting any piece of paper, any word from the U.S.? I mean, you can go back to the 2018 when we got out of the JCPOA that had been worked on with the Obama administration to the 2025 12-day war that was in the middle of negotiations. This war, which is in the middle of negotiations, now we're at least saying we want to negotiate again. How is anybody going to believe anything the United States says? What is that? And I get it. I agree with you. The diplomacy's dead, but it's dead because we stabbed it with a knife all these times over all the years, and now we need it to live so that we can get out.
Snap your W-2 and file your taxes 100% free, plus get your biggest refund. Roughly 37% of filers qualify. Simple Form 1040 returns only. No schedules except for Earned Income Tax Credit, Child Tax Credit, and Student Loan Interest. File now.
Where can we go from here?
Colonel, let me just say this first. You led into something just now, and the thing that we hear, and I was talking about it earlier, about trust. Who's to trust who? When I go through this, and they remind me to get back to something that you said about the casualties, okay, that, it's not really changing anything. But I want your audience to think about this, and we need to think about this, and we need to drum this, and so people understand it versus the rhetoric that the administration and the pundits do. Well, where they say this started in 1979 with the revolution. They hate us. Death to America. No, it started in 1953. Everybody needs to understand that. We overthrew their Democratic elected government for the thing that Trump loved most, to take their oil, BP, in Britain. We overthrew them. A Democrat elected government. Should they trust us? The next thing, we supported, of all things, Iraq, Saddam in the war between Iraq and Iran. And Iraq introduced chemical weapons in that war. Should they trust us? You mentioned about the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, better known as the Iran nuclear deal. They were abiding by it. We broke that, Mr. President Trump. Now, I must tell you, once again, he was being pushed by Bibi Netanyahu in regards to that and Lindsey Graham. You know why we broke that? Because our Iranians would not include a reduction of their ballistic missiles. And now, can you blame them? That was their first line of defense. That's why they didn't need a nuclear weapon, because they had the ballistic missiles, which we now know, which I've been on record for over 2 years saying those ballistic missiles are accurate and very powerful. So they were not going to get rid of those nuclear. So we broke this JCPOA. Then we also, allegedly, accidentally, we shot down one of their civilian aircraft and killed hundreds of people, 100 and so people. And then, as you mentioned earlier, in modern times right now, we bombed them in the middle of negotiations. We bombed them twice now. And then we bombed in the first day of the war children. Should they trust us? We've shown, unfortunately, that we can't be trusted in negotiations. Now, let me mention about the casualties. As I alluded to earlier, I was a contract program manager for the entire Wounded Warrior program out of the Pentagon. Not the Wounded Warrior Project, a nonprofit organization, but the official sanctioned Wounded Warrior program out of the Pentagon. And when I started hearing about the so few of casualties, I said, it can't be true. I meet periodically with some other former folks that worked in the Wounded program once a week. And we started thinking about that. There have to be more casualties than what are being reporting. So we called over to Landstuhl. That is the hub where we bring folks in off from the combat zone. And the number of casualties were being censored. Now, with that said, we asked the question and said, the response we got, don't make me lie to you. You've been in this business. You know the answer. And then me, myself, I made a call to the Pentagon. You understand about casualties and all that. I said, are we being told the numbers? No. And then finally, another question I asked in regards to the casualties. We went through this with the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. Colonel, we were not ready for those wars back then. As I said, we're making the same mistakes. I got exposed to the casualties coming back. I was out at Andrews Air Force Base, Joint Base Andrews, we call it now, as the command chief, command sergeant major in your term, or the command master chief for the Navy. Because we didn't have room for the casualties returning, we had to take our recreation center and make it a triage temporary hospital to accept the returning casualties. And so now what I'm telling you right now, there are more, you can take this to the bank, more casualties than been reported, because what something you just said right now, it hasn't hit home with the American people. And so now they can somewhat disguise it and hide it. But we introduce, and I don't like to say this, and I always tell my audience and people this, I hate to say this, but I want to correct us too, because we have a tendency to say this. I hate saying boots on the ground. That's something Rumsfeld used to say, because it's dehumanizing the men and women. I like to say troops, but I like to get more personal and say the men and women that we're putting on the ground. You know, as a war veteran, that we're going to have a lot more casualties on the ground, and they're not going to be able to cover that up. And I think that is when it's going to hit the American populace that, hey, you know, this was bad, and we need to get out of there sooner than later.
So where do we go now? Given the absence, not even the lack of, but the absence of trust from the Iranian side, given that they are in a position of superiority in terms of leverage over this war and the physical control of the Strait of Hormuz, where does this go? If President Trump wants out, what can he do if we don't give in to the terms that the Iranians are looking for, which is reparations, which is leave the region, which is give them security guarantees, et cetera, which I don't think President Trump has the wherewithal to give. So then where does that leave us?
Colonel, as your sergeant major, I'm here to tell you we're in a can of you know what. Because, and I will tell you, the three reasons we went to war in Iraq, one of the words I'm going to use that's going to come into play right now, was in support of Israel, not assumption or opinion, but a fact. I saw the playbook, the Pentagon Papers, the dream of then President Bush of democracy in the Middle East. And then finally, this key word I'm about to say right now, credibility. Rumsfeld was strong on credibility. We had a so-called regime change in Iraq under the Clinton administration, and we had not carried that out. What Trump is going to be pushed, unless we get more Lindsey Graham saying to get out of this somehow, he's going to be pushed because the America's credibility of us saying that we're going to have regime change, we're going to get rid of their potential nuclear weapons program, and we're going to get those ballistic missiles reduced. I think there's no turning around, Colonel. And I think until we see more death and destruction, unfortunately, this is where I give an opinion or assumption, as was done in Afghanistan with the Taliban being in charge, as is done in Iraq, where we had to get everybody out of Iraq to include get out of our embassy that we spent so much money on. I think this is going to be one that really put America back, where there's a possibility that we could lose the psychological war, meaning that we may have to be the one to give in if we start losing too many troops. And let me just say this. I know we have to go. There's been a lot of talk, and I want you to think about this for a moment. There's been a lot of talk about if we put troops in there and we start losing troops, and because we can't get out, there's been talk about drafts. Well, I think that'll take congressional moves to get the draft. But what could happen again is we start pouring more troops in. We already had a draft during the Iraq and Afghanistan war. I call it the backdoor draft, where you'll understand this, stop loss. And as you so eloquently try to tell your audience, hey, what certain terms mean. Stop loss mean we were not allowing officers, or in particular enlisted men and women whose term of enlisted had ended, we would not let them out. We forced them to continue fighting that war. And oh, by the way, with the Guard and Reserve, we extended their active duty service, or what I call a backdoor draft. And I could see that happening again. And so, Colonel, I can tell you, you say, where do we go from here? I think we're in trouble.
I couldn't put it any better or any worse, depending on how you want to look at it. That is how I see it. We have gotten ourselves into a box because of years, if not decades, of lying and thinking we could just do whatever we wanted. And now we are in a position where we can't extricate ourselves, and someone has leverage over us that we can't force our way out of. This is a position that nobody in America has been in for, I don't know, more than a century. I can't even remember the last time, maybe during World Wars I or II, maybe. Even then we were in a position where we could pretty much call the shots, but now we can't call any shots. And I'll tell you, my biggest fear, and I'll get your view on here as we close down here today, is that instead of going into a draft, backdoor or otherwise, that we may say, you know what, man, that nuclear weapon's looking awfully good right now, because that's just to push a button and the whole thing's gone and it's over with. So he may think in his head. I think that there'll be a risk if we can't open the strait and we get our troops on the ground, and we go in on the ground and get our ass handed to us, that there'll be a risk of the President Trump doing that. And I bet he'll be advised about that by some. That's what I fear.
I've been asked a question about that, Colonel. My opinion, once again, is opinion and assumption, is that my hope is I just don't see, this is one time I have faith in the generals. I just don't see them carrying that out, of introducing a nuclear weapon. But what we must remember, in the terms of a nuclear weapon or atomic weapon, we're the only country to ever use such a device. Just ask Japan. Now, with that said, though, however, I can't say the same thing about Israel, because they're being hit hard. And if they do, there's most experts that feel that they have the nuclear weapons. If they do, I can see them possibly using it. Now, I want to leave you with one last thing that came out of my book, Deadly Betrayal. I hope I can read it. Listen to what I'm about to read here. This came from a former Secretary of Defense and a former CIA leader. In my opinion, any future defense secretary who advises the president to again send big American troops on a land invasion in Asia, the Middle East, or Africa should have their head examined. And that was from Secretary of Defense Bill Gates. And so right now, whoever is advising the commander-in-chief, they should have their head examined.
That is such a great point. I remember when he said that, and I had forgotten about that, but boy, does it ever need to be dusted off right now. Maybe it's a little late, but it's good to know because he was right then, and it's being proven right at the moment. Well, listen, Chief, we really appreciate you coming on today. Look forward to having you back one of these days soon, but we love your just cutting to the chase and calling things what they are. We appreciate that.
Well, Colonel, it was my honor and pleasure to appear with you, and thank you so much for the invite.
Thank you very much. We'll look forward to seeing you guys on the next episode of the Daniel Davis Deep Dive. Don't forget to tell your friends, the ones that love to listen to podcasts. Get them to add Daniel Davis Deep Dive to their podcast list. They need to know what you know. They can get it to where they already get their podcast. You just got to tell them.
Coverage, it's all smoke and mirrors.
Wednesday, April 1st, 2026, our dear friend or brother, Scott Rader is here with us. Welcome back, Scott.
Thanks for having me.
Scott, let me start with what Donald Trump posted moments ago. He's talking about Iran's new regime president is asking for a ceasefire, is asking Donald Trump and his administration for a ceasefire, which was rejected by the Iranian government. So far, I've seen in the Persian media. And even in the latest interview that the Iranian foreign minister yesterday had on Al Jazeera, here is what the Iranian foreign minister said.
Is currently ongoing, but your point is correct. We have no good experience of negotiating with the United States. In the past, we negotiated and reached an agreement, only for the United States to withdraw from it for no reason. Twice more, this year and last year, we negotiated, and the result was their assault and attack. There is no trust that negotiation with the United States can lead to results. Trust is at zero. Every time they present a proposal for negotiation, the first issue we must examine is how honest they are, and we see none. There is no trust, and to build trust, major steps must be taken. Whether the Islamic Republic decides to do so or not is another matter. But in response to any proposal, the issue is how much trust exists. At present, no trust exists.
It seems, Scott, the day Donald Trump going to talk and going to address the nation, he's basically focused on the war in the Middle East between Iran and the United States. It's so much amazing that Israel is in the background. He's not anymore on the front line. And what is your understanding of the new escalations? Because many people think that they may attack, they may try to invade Iran from the southern part in this weekend. What is your understanding of that?
Have you ever done an invasion?
No.
I have. We're not going to invade anywhere, not with 10,000 troops. All right. We can do a raid. Maybe we can go in, do some things, get out. Maybe. Might get away with it. But we're not invading anything. So this is a stupidity. People talking about an invasion have never done it. They don't know what it is. They don't know anything about the military. They don't know anything about war. They don't know anything about logistics. Two Marine battalion landing teams. You could scare, Red Beach 1 and Red Beach 2. Yay, we went in. We advanced 500 meters. Then we have to stop. Now, where's the follow-on echelon? Oh, there isn't a follow-on echelon. So you're sort of stuck where you're at right now. Yeah. It's not a big beachhead now, is it? No. 500 Marines isn't a lot of Marines. Everybody's like, 4,000. Yeah, most of them are like logistics and air wingers, actual, boots on the ground, rifle companies. No. And so this is just stupid. Anybody talking about a ground invasion literally doesn't know what they're talking about. There could be a raid, but you're not going to hold any territory with 10,000, people. And like I said, there's only 4,000 Marines deployed in the area, and half of them aren't combat troops. Half of them, they're wingers staying on the airplane.
It seems they have more than 10,000. They're talking about 50,000 soldiers
Where?
being in.
How are you going to get 50,000 soldiers? Where do they come from?
I don't know.
They don't come from anywhere yet. They're not there. And again, they're not soldiers. We have a lot of airmen. Did you take a look at the guys that died in that first drone attack? Those aren't frontline combat troops. Those are fat reservists. I mean, I'm not picking on them. I'm sorry they're dead, but these weren't the tip of the spear. These aren't guys that you've been out there doing their push-ups, pull-ups, and running and hiking with 45-pound packs, 90-pound packs, 110-pound packs. Humping mortar rounds, base plates, and all. No, they don't know how to do that. They were sitting in a bunker and they got killed. The vast majority of the people in theater are just that. Support troops, logistics troops. There's no combat troops. And the combat troops, they require sustainability. That means we got to have, let's just make it this very, very clear. We're making this up as we go along. We don't have a plan. If we had a plan, the Marines would have been deployed forward up front. This is all reactive. If we had a plan, the paratroopers would be in theater, ready to rock and roll. If we had a plan, the Rangers and Delta would already be on the ground doing their stuff. This is all reaction because we thought we were going to win this war that quick. We thought we were going to drop a couple bombs, kill the Ayatollah, down goes the regime. Look at the stupidity of this president. The new president of Iran. He's the same president, same guy I talked to back in September before the war. It's not a new president. It's not new leadership. It's the same freaking leadership. Araghchi's the same foreign minister. Yeah, they killed some people, but they got replaced. That's what happens when you have a system. And what all the Iranians said is that they're not looking for a ceasefire. They're looking for the war to end and to make sure there's not another war. And if those conditions can be met, they'd be willing to stop the war. But until then, no, they're going to keep going, keep plugging away. And I loved all the people tracking the missile launches. They fired this many day one. Look, it's getting smaller. They got nothing left. Last night, boom. The Iranians went, yeah, eat that and die. And they'll just keep doing that. The Iranians have been planning this for 20 years. There's nothing reaction about the Iranians. The Iranians are going with a plan. We're reacting to the plan. There's not going to be a ground invasion. Simply won't be. There, like I said, there might be a raid. But again, the raid to accomplish what? Having planned a raid, a major raid during the Iraq War, the Gulf War, and having defended it before the Commandant of the Marine Corps and a panel of 4- and 3-star generals, and having to answer a lot of questions as to what's the risk gain. I mean, are we about just proving that the LAV-25, which at the time was a relatively new thing, can be inserted by helicopter? We can run around, shoot things up, and then come out. Because if that's what it's about, we're not too thrilled about this because there's Marines on that. They can die. There has to be a reason for the raid. If you could, secure the 60% enriched uranium with a raid, in, up, out, something like that would be a raid, a reason. Karg Island. We're not going to hold Karg Island. We're not even going to take Karg Island. But even if we did, I mean, has anybody looked at a map? see where Iran is, and you understand that Karg Island is sort of low and flat, and it's going to be leveled, and the Iranians know everything about it. We know nothing about it. No, it would be a death match. It would be stupid. This president is dumber than hell. I think the Iranians said it best. He's negotiating with himself. He's making things up. There's a lot of wishful thinking. Anytime the Iranians, first of all, the Iranians made it clear they're not going to negotiate with the United States. That just isn't going to happen. And so he has Egypt, Pakistan, Turkey, and maybe some others, trying to reach out to the Iranians. And if the Iranians take the call, the president, see, they're negotiating with us. No, they're not. They just took a call from the Pakistanis. What they told the Pakistanis is tell the Americans to pound sand. Trump doesn't want to hear that. This man lives in a fantasy world. He's going to try, he needs to create the conditions where he gets to say, I won the war. The Iranians aren't going to play that game. They don't care about domestic American politics. What they care about is ending this war so that there never is another war. That means that Israel doesn't get to do what it's been doing and the United States doesn't get to do what it's been doing. And that requires the Gulf Arab states to be broken, totally broken. Broken to the extent that they no longer look to the United States as their saviors, that they realize they have to live in this region in peace and harmony with the Iranians, which they have to start treating the Iranians with respect. This might require some regime change in the Gulf Arab states. In the United Arab Emirates in particular, maybe it's time for that family to go goodbye. Maybe in Bahrain, goodbye. Maybe in Kuwait, goodbye. It's all possible. These aren't popularly elected regimes. These are monarchies installed by the British. So it's not like these people earned their right to be there. They were given it, and then they just sit there on their oil and they build giant palaces and live this pompous, lavish lifestyle where, because of the amount of money they can apply to a given problem, they've been able to solve most problems. Well, you ain't solving the Iranian problem too well, and I think they're going to be broken. The United States is already broken. We don't have a solution. We don't have a solution to the Strait of Hormuz. And it's only going to get worse. The Iranians hold all the cards. So, Donald Trump is he's in a fantasy world because he can't admit that he made a mistake. He can't admit that Pete Hegseth, the worst Secretary of Defense in the history of Secretary of Defenses, lied to him, misled him. And he needs to create this narrative that says, I am the conquering hero, that because of my decisive action, great things happened. The Iranians aren't going to. I mean, the sad thing is, we had a deal, and now we don't. Now there is some talk, and I'm pretty hopeful for if it turns out, where the Iranians said that they may be willing to let the Russians serve as a mediator. This is what I've been pushing for. This is what I pushed for when I went to Russia. I went to Russia and I made as big a noise as I could about getting the Russians to be mediators here, because that is the solution. A Russian mediation can solve a lot of problems, because now Trump can do some posturing, and such. But it's early on, and again, the end result has to be the United States out of the Middle East and Israel accepting a Palestinian state, and there needs to be international security guarantees. I always love it how the Ukrainians go, we need security guarantees. Well, I think the Arab world needs security guarantees against Israel. Israel can't be allowed to have the same military that it's been having. It has no right. It can't be allowed to go out and bomb everybody. They bombed 5 countries in the last week. I mean, come on, man.
I'm not really a cupcake, but I am super baked, thanks to Mood Can of
Mood is third-party tested, so you know it's safe.
And it should.
Even they're bombing Syria, and Ben Gvir is talking about assassinating, the head of HTS in Syria. It's amazing, Scott. When it comes to the war, you've mentioned it's going to be, if they attack, it's going to be a raid on part. What would be the outcome of that? What do they need? I would somehow, I'm not 100% sure, but I really believe that they cannot achieve anything if they go for it. Those 400, kilogram of enriched uranium, they're not gonna, they're not gonna find it. They're not gonna do anything of that sort of grabbing it,
But I can't imagine the Iranians saying, all right, we got 406 kilograms of 6% uranium hexafluoride. All right, guys, let's put it in a lightly guarded facility near the coast of the Persian Gulf. All right. And we'll just sort of like leave it there so the Americans can come in and launch a raid and take it. Now, I think it's like deeper inside Iran in a mountain, which means the raid will have to penetrate deeply into Iranian airspace. We'll get shot down on the way in, and then we have Black Hawk down all over again. A helicopter goes down. We got people on the ground, survivors, Iranians coming all around them. Close air support's brought in. More helicopters go, more aircraft go down, and now the whole thing's bogged down before it even began, because this isn't World War II. In World War II, you send in the C-47s, and 3 of them get shot down. So sad, too bad, wouldn't want to be you, but you just keep going. No, this is the modern day. Helicopter down. We got to come in combat search and rescue. We got to put guys on the ground. We got to do the whole Black Hawk Down thing. We don't leave a man behind. And then everybody dies. If we do a raid into Iran, my prediction is the entire raiding force will be destroyed. Because we're going into, again, this isn't carefully planned. Everything that's being done here is being done for political reasons, not for legitimate military reasons. There's no reason to go after the 450 or 60 kilograms of uranium hexafluoride. None whatsoever. We had a deal where they were going to give it to us. And my advice to the president would be, do whatever you can to get that deal back on the table. Whatever it takes, to include getting the hell out of the Middle East. Tell the Iranians, we're going to get the hell out of the Middle East, but you got to turn over that 450 kilograms of uranium hexafluoride. Enriched 60% enriched, 60%. And this is where the Russians can come in. The Russians can do this stuff, lifting of sanctions and things of that nature. I think the Iranians would give it up. It's caused them nothing but trouble, caused them nothing but problems. And what I would tell the Iranians is, we'll leave the bases. And we'll work with the Israelis to, change behavior. But we need you to, that deal that was on the table, we need you to do that deal. You're closing the door forever on your potential of developing nuclear weapons. That's just the way it is. You're going to sign a deal that says you will never be able to build nuclear weapons. You will be permanently limited to 3.75% enriched uranium, carefully safeguarded, etc. That's it. And I think Iran would do it, but not with the Americans dictating.
I really don't think that they're going to do it.
Well,
those days are gone. In my opinion, those days are gone.
I don't think so.
To understand what's going on in Iran right now.
I know full well what's going on in Iran, and I know that the Iranian people have said they will rip the president apart if he negotiates with the United States. Okay, but now the Russians come in. And if the Russians sit down with you and go, okay, stupid people, because you are stupid right now. You're being destroyed. Yay, you're tough. You're really tough. We're really impressed. God, I'm so impressed how tough you are. But you say you care about your people. They're about to do permanent damage to your infrastructure. Permanent damage to your infrastructure. You will never recover from this, ever. All right? So now you can say there, oh, God, we're the Shia. Oh, yay, we're so good. Karbala, 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 Karbala. Wow. That's stupid. How about lifting sanctions? How about getting the sanctions lifted, getting you fully engaged?
They don't want it anymore, Scott. The main problem.
Of course they want it.
They need it. Yeah, I know.
No,
but
they don't need
the
it.
priority is not the sanctions right now. The priority has changed.
What's
They're talking about Israel. Because they're talking about Israel. They know the sanction option. They know
what's their priority about Israel?
Yeah, Israel should be denuclearized.
Should be destroyed? Iran doesn't get to make that decision.
Yeah, but Israel, right now, the problem is Israel, Scott. As long as Israel has nukes, these nuclear weapons.
Iran, Lima, this is fantasy. This is cocaine-sniffing fantasy. If you think Iran has the leverage to get Israel to give up its nuclear weapons like that, you're hiring a kite. You know how Israel will give up its nuclear weapons? On Iran. That's how they'll give them up.
This is not my point. This is not my point that forcing Israel. This is that as long as Israel keeps up with his nukes on its soil and is talking about Samson option, there is no way to have some sort of balance.
Israel's never talked about the Samson option. Israel has never talked about the Samson option.
They talk about, Their minister said that about Gaza. They said use the nukes against Gazans. The Gazans have nothing.
Skipping minister who's high as a kite, who's sitting there saying stupid stuff. Find me the official policy statement of the Israeli government that said we'll drop nuclear weapons on Gaza. Because we have Americans that said the same thing, and they're just stupid mouth-breathing morons. Okay, let's get to the official policies of the Israeli government. There is an official protocol that exists between Israel and the United States on the use of nuclear weapons, and Israel will not violate that protocol.
I really don't think that Iran would accept.
Then Iran dies. Then Iran dies.
The worst thing has happened, Scott.
No, the worst thing has not happened.
Yeah, no, nothing. What else can they do? They want to use nuclear bombs? Go ahead and use it.
And then what? How tough are you then with your dying of your radiation sickness?
They're going to see what they have. They're going to see, Scott. I think they have to understand
the Iranians are going to unveil their 3 15-kiloton nuclear weapons that they managed to scrape together. Yay!
I'm saying I think that they know how to respond to that, because it's not my opinion, my personal opinion, because I talked with many of them when I was in Iran. I know
the people.
They said what?
Decision makers or the people?
I'm talking about decision makers. I'm not talking about.
And you're telling me right now that the decision makers in Iran,
yeah,
won't go for, because first of all, what you're saying is it doesn't conform with the Iranian government's saying. The Iranian government is saying that if the United States leaves the Middle East and Israel, if there's behavioral checks and balances on Israel, they never once mentioned Israel's nuclear weapons as a precondition. That's your thing. They never mentioned it. And
what I think the official policy is, Iran is keeping this level of enrichment. They're not going to give up the level of enrichment because they want to be prepared for Israel. If Israel decides to attack Iran using nuclear weapons, they want to be prepared to respond to Israel. That's the whole concept. What I've learned, it's not my opinion. It's not my opinion to put it. I'm not discussing from my point of view. It's because I talk with many of these decision makers in Iran. They said they're prepared to the end. They said the end is the use of nuclear weapons. They're prepared for that. It's not something.
Well, I mean, there's nothing you can do. I mean, it's like looking at a person in the ocean.
The other part.
The Russians can save your ass. The Russians can save your ass. That's the only chance you have. Because otherwise, you're just going to get pounded to death.
You know, Scott, even Medvedev said that 2 days ago. He said that the outcome of this war would be NPT, Iran withdrawing from NPT and being a nuclear power, having nuclear bombs. And he said that. When someone like Medvedev says that, it means something. It doesn't mean that his assessment of what's going on in Iran is.
That's the only assessment that matters. Did Putin say it?
No.
Then don't talk to me about Medvedev. Don't talk to me about Karaganov. Don't talk to me about anybody.
Yeah, when it comes to Russia, Scott, when it comes to Russia, we have to understand what's going on against Russia and Iran, because I think they're fighting the same war. What Russia is fighting, what Iran is fighting is the same. The same people, by the way, the same people.
And they're
the
not
people
fighting
who are in Ukraine are the same people who are in Israel.
They're not fighting the same war, Nima.
Yeah,
because
the same war.
Russia's not ready to commit suicide. Okay, Iran is apparently, according to you. That's not the same war. One is a rational approach towards achieving objectives that are well laid out, the Russian approach, ending the war. I'd hope that Iran would be on that course too. But if Iran is saying we're willing to die and commit suicide, the Russian, because Iranian suicide means the destruction of the global economy.
They don't trust you.
And Russia's not about that. I can guarantee you Russia's not about that. Russia's not looking to die with Iran. They're not willing to hold their hands and die with Iran.
They're not there to wreck the whole economy. They're there
the Russians are there to find a path to peace. That's the guaranteed.
Yeah, but they're not trying to destroy Russian economy or Chinese economy, because they're considered, so far in the Strait of Hormuz, all those Chinese and even Indian, even Pakistani tankers were passing through the Strait of Hormuz. This is not the problem with the world.
Because they're paying money.
Yeah, they're paying, exactly. They don't have these countries because they're saying that these are friendly countries. The problem is how to put pressure on the United States. It's not how to put pressure on China, on Russia. And these countries understand what's going on with the case of the Strait of Hormuz particularly. Because right now, the main problem, before this war started, Donald Trump was all about nuclear weapons and nuclear program. Right now, his main concern, priority is the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah.
Be honest.
Of course it is, because the Iranians, that's their trump card. But again, do you consider Donald Trump to be a rational actor or an irrational actor?
I don't see Donald Trump being a rational actor. I don't see any more Donald Trump being irrational. Or nobody.
Right. No, it's irrational.
Irrational. He's irrational.
100%
irrational.
Emotionally driven, not fact driven.
Yeah.
All right. So what will happen in your mind if the Iranians, look, don't get me wrong. I think the Iranians are doing a fantastic job. I mean, they have a plan. They've been sticking to their plan. We've been reacting to them from day one. So they got the whole OODA loop sequence going in their favor. They're driving the decision-making cycle and all that. But the difference is on Iran's best day, they can put 5 nuclear weapons on a missile and take Israel out. And then Iran will cease to exist. I hope Iran understands that. Everybody says we're ready for it. You don't know what you're ready for, because life will end for everybody. The United States will now come in. It won't be Israeli nukes, be American nukes, and ours are a lot bigger and more. And you want to see how many 20 million people in Tehran? You know what a 1 megaton bomb will do to Tehran? Take it out.
Why would the United States do that? If Iran
can use nuclear weapons against Israel?
No.
Yeah. No.
Scott is out of his mind if he think that Russia, China, and North Korea don't let the U.S. nuke Iran. If the U.S. uses nuclear weapons, then everybody gonna use nuclear weapons.
I'm talking about why would the United States use nuclear weapons against Iran?
The loser don't get to dictate the terms of the war. See, that's what Scott. That's what Zelensky them trying to do in Ukraine with Russia winning. Iran is winning the war. Why would they let the U.S. dictate the motherfucking terms? If they say they would never ever give up their enrichment, then that's what the winner will dictate. And militarily, you got to stop that. In the U.S. and Israel, once they talk nukes, it shows they're militarily weak positions. Once these guys are talking about using nuclear weapons, they're in a weak position. That's just a fact.
Is because of Israel or because of the United States?
Donald Trump is an irrational actor who's
what's
more than
main
anything.
Objective? Yeah, let's assume
His
what
main objective is not to be beaten by Iran.
So you think that he's going to go nuclear just because of he's not he doesn't want to be beaten?
See, this is what I'm trying to say about the people in this country. See, Scott act like he's against the white supremacists, but he still want white privilege over an imperial power over this situation. Even in the losing hand, he still wants to win. No, you don't get to do that, Scott. Trump don't get to play crazy and say, I'm so crazy, I will blow every fucking thing up. Them people not worried about that. You can laugh and say, oh, they suicidal. Well, they are a martyr society. They are all willing to go behind this. That's what the U.S. don't understand. And they don't even, Scott don't even understand what he's talking about. Use nuclear weapons if you want to. Them people now scared of them threats, bro. You're not going to be able to scare them into it. And if you use it, you open up the Pandora's box. Just do that. Just do that and find out they already got them motherfuckers. They got submarines, all that shit. America not gonna be able to threaten to kill everybody to get up out of this war. They're gonna have to kill everybody if they want to win. And they still gonna lose.
No,
because they're gonna get nuked.
I think Donald Trump understand. After all, Scott, so far Donald Trump tried to do regime. The main goal, I think, was regime change. It wasn't about the military operation. If it was a military operation, they were prepared for the military operation, for the war. They were not prepared for this war. They were deceived by Mossad, I think, basically, and some people in CIA, that they can do regime change. You remember, you and I discussed this before. You said if they go there, they're going to do regime change, going to be a regime change operation. But that was a fantasy. I think it was sold by Mossad.
Well, you remember what I said about regime change. I said it would be a regime change operation. It's the only way they could do to, because of the limited military capabilities. I said the only way we could do this is to do a regime change that collapsed Iran before their missiles could become fully engaged. But I also said that you can't initiate the regime change unless you have certainty of outcome. And I said, that means that the Israelis need to have this place totally penetrated. The United States needs to have it totally penetrated, and we've got to go in there and we got to get it done. And across the board, a fundamental regime change isn't killing the supreme leader. Regime change is suppressing the totality of the establishment. And if you could do that, then you could initiate this action. I think that it's clear that they couldn't do that. That they were laboring under the impression that by killing Ali Khamenei, that achieved that's Donald Trump's simplicity. And I blame the Iranian, missions. They don't have the Iranian Mission Center anymore, but this, Near East division of the CIA, they got to know. I mean, they've got to know the truth about Iran. I say they've got to because the CIA doesn't know the truth about Russia today. So, clearly the CIA can start believing their own propaganda. And I think that's what happened. I think one of the things that happened in Iran is that we started, if you go back in the history, there was a guy, Steve Richter, good old Steve Richter, my good old friend, hates me. He was doing the regime change in Iraq, but he also did the Iran. And there was a time, I forget, in the 80s or something, where we needed intelligence, maybe in the early 90s. And we had a network of people dating back to, the Shah's time, all the stay-behinds. And they were in there, and we had them all there, and they're reporting. And then the requirement came down, you need to increase your Iran reporting. And Steve Richter, they were running a mail operation where they were basically mailing letters out to Munich. And you could do that every now and then. So, you get 5,000 pieces of mail going out today, 3 letters going to Munich. That's not raising the profile. That's normal. Normally the CIA would have pre-thought this thing out. How do you test the postal system, see what triggers it, and then you keep that sustained thing going, get those letters out there and all that with the secret writing in them and all. Richter was told, double down. So Richter basically told everybody, just start mailing letters. And so what happened is suddenly the mail going to Munich went way up, and the Iranians went, grab the mail, knock on the door, bring them in, open it up, secret writing, interrogate, find the secret writing materials, and they rolled up the whole network. We lost everybody in Iran that quick. We tried to rebuild it with rapid recruitment. This was in this would have been in the 2000s, where we, all those people that traveled around the world, all the, professors and the scientists that went to this meeting, that meeting, we came in there and we did what we do. Sometimes it didn't work. Sometimes it worked. Get them drunk, get them with a whore, take pictures, confront them with the reality that their family life's over and they're going to be killed when they go back to Iran, and they start rolling over for you. And so we get them all in there, but now we're communicating using Gmail, the old Gmail, CIA Gmail account. And, again, I forget who came up with it. I can't remember if it was the Iranians that rolled it up first and then gave it to the Russians, who then gave it to the Chinese, or the Russians gave it. Bottom line is somebody figured it out. And so the second wave of recruitment went away, which means now we're totally dependent upon Israel. Israel, of course, has been working with the Kurds and working with MEK and working with others. And so now you got Israel in there doing their thing, and the Israelis, they assassinate scientists, and they put viruses in that cause things to blow up. They blow things up, and they're like, we're the Israelis, we're so damn good, we're awesome. We even did a raid on this archive and took all these papers out, although they didn't, and all this stuff. And so the CIA said, well, rather than us doing a third round of recruitment, we're just going to rely on the Israelis and dovetail on the Israeli op. And so the Israelis are telling them, we infiltrated, 5,000 Starlinks, and we have these cells, and we have this, and we have people in every city, and we have this, and we're doing this, and we got this, and we got that. The CIA's going, wow, you guys are really good. So when we kill Ali Khamenei, you're going to be able to get people in the street. And Mossad's like, yeah, we got this. We are good. We are Mossad. And the CIA thought it was great. And they went and told the president that this is all going to happen. And the president called up Netanyahu, and people went, yeah, baby, we can do this. And they went forward. You never, ever, ever go to war based upon another country's intelligence. Never. Because that intelligence service doesn't work for you. And they're not working for your best interest. They're working for their government's best interest. And the Israelis have always wanted the United States to be doing what they're doing right now. This isn't Israeli fantasy. To have America dropping bombs on Iran, this is what they've been wanting for 20 years. And Donald Trump delivered it. But Donald Trump was led down that path by a CIA that had an op pulled on it. It's the old, the Israelis are so good they can do nothing wrong thing. We know that Iran's a tough target, but the Israelis got guys inside there. Man, the Mossad's really good. They're really awesome. Well, they're not bad, but they're not perfect. They make a lot of mistakes. And the one thing about the Iranians is
we grew up on a lot of these big brands that we knew.
They're not your typical target, I believe. I mean, every society has its weaknesses. Every society has its flawed individuals. And those people are susceptible to being recruited and betraying their countries. But this is where I think the West got it wrong. And this is where I think you actually have greater insight than I do and others. The Iranian people believe in the Islamic Republic. They may not think it's perfect. They would like a better life. They think they may even think that some of the Ayatollahs are corrupt and should be replaced. But the concept of an Islamic Republic, where religion is an important part of their daily lives, this is not fantasy to them. This is not imposed. This is what they want, and they have that. And then there's also the notion of Persian pride. I mean, we're talking about people who know their history, they know their culture, they know where they came from. And there's just a lot of pride in Iran that isn't going to be, they're not going to allow themselves to be sold out. So the notion that we could go in there and buy them off, the Venezuela solution, which is, that's the other thing, because Trump was told by the CIA, we can buy the entire Venezuelan leadership. And I think he was told that we can buy the entire Iranian leadership. That's, one of the interesting analytical failures is what we did with the Revolutionary Guard. You remember Rafsanjani at the end of the Iran-Iraq War, Rafsanjani looking to rebuild Iran, and also learning, politically, what do we do with the Revolutionary Guard? These radicals who are out there, we want to do all this stuff. He turned them on to business and got them into the business sector, and they began to run businesses. And we said that's corruption. Except they were actually doing good business. They were actually building things. They were actually producing things. They were actually making an energetic economy. But we called it corruption. And so we said that the Revolutionary Guard Command is all inherently corrupt. And when you have corrupt people, they can be bought off. Except they weren't corrupt. I mean, were there some examples of corruption? Sure. Money tempts everybody. But overall, the fact that the IRGC was heavily involved in Iran's economy is not a sign of societal failure. It's actually a sign of societal success. And it also further radicalizes the wrong word, but it further solidified the Islamic aspect. So you don't have secular businessmen out there. You have people who believe in the Islamic Republic doing business. It made it impossible to buy them off. Impossible to buy them off. We got Iran all wrong. I mean, you and I didn't. We got it right, I think. But the CIA, we being the United States, we got it all wrong. 110% wrong. We were so far off in terms of our assessments. And so we still don't understand what's going on there. Donald Trump's still not getting a qualified briefing. And nobody has the courage to go in front of him and tell him the truth. You saw James Webb, former Secretary of the Navy under Ronald Reagan. His son is out there now saying things that on the surface looks like he's condemning the attack, and but he just keeps saying things like, the Iranian regime is, this, that, and the other thing. I'm like, no, that's not it, man. You got it wrong. And it seems people are impossible, that you can't say anything about Iran without saying, the murderous, thuggish Ayatollah regime. but it's not murderous and thuggish. They have a judiciary that's, we execute more people in America. I mean, we put more people in jail. Where's our murderous, thuggish justice system? You know, the Iranians, they have stiff penalties for drug dealers. They have stiff penalties for adulterers, I guess. They have stiff penalty for traitors. you know, is it the justice system that I would want? I don't know. I don't live in Iran. I don't know what the problem. What would happen if you didn't have stiff drug penalties? Would Iran suddenly find a thriving narcotic black market where people are getting high in tea shops around the country and sinking society from within? So maybe you have to deter that because you live in a neighborhood where Afghanistan's producing opium and shipping it through, trying to get into other markets. Maybe you need that kind of deterrence. Adultery, if you're an Islamic republic and moral values, family values are the cornerstone of what holds your society together, adultery is probably frowned upon. It's seen as if you allow adultery to take place, then your society will be, again, undermined from within and collapse from within, because it's what makes the Islamic Republic strong is, Shia faith, and the Shia faith is built around family. I mean, I got lectured by the Chechens about this, and they're not Shia, they're Sunni, they're Sufi, but again, their whole concept of family and the role that
Sufi is so close, by the way. Sufi is so close to Shia.
I know, that's most mystical. I had a long talk. I got to meet the Grand Mufti of Chechnya. I have a long conversation with him, and fascinating conversation. And I talked to him about the role that Chechnya could play. The Chechens are. They had a big parade the other day, and they're like, "You invaded Iran, we're coming in. We're coming in to fight on the side of Iran." The Sufi Chechens coming in to fight with the Iranians. But the point, we don't understand these things. We're so ignorant. We've allowed Islamophobia to corrupt our minds to where the only model we can see is Wahhabism, which is sort of a Western invention to begin with. Salafism is a Western perversion of traditional stuff. We can go back to what was it? I can't remember the name of the guy who defeated the Mongols. Back in Syria, began with a T, Tarmiya or something like that. But he defeated the Mongols and then tried to take over and say that he was the guy, but he was quickly pushed to the side, and that got pushed, and then this sort of became the beginning of Wahhabism. But the British allowed Wahhabism to flourish and be exported. The point is, we don't know Iran at all. And so therefore, I will say this, I get a little angry, but I don't know Iran. So you may be right, 100% right about your percent. You were in Iran, you know the language and all this stuff. I think you're making a mistake if you think that Russia and Iran have the same objectives. They don't.
No, they don't have. I don't think so.
Objectives are about for Russia.
Grand scheme of things, yes, they do. Iran, North Korea, China, Russia, all the same objectives. Survive against the West. Do not have their civilization collapse. Do not let the small hats run the banks in their countries. That's just a fact. They don't want federal reserves in their countries.
Russia.
Yeah, exactly.
But Russia's objectives also include two major things: Iran being an integral part of BRICS, and the north-south economic corridor for Russia to get from St. Peter's down to Chabahar, and all that. And so for that to happen, Russia needs Iran to survive this war.
And Russia needs...
He just said the objectives wasn't the same. If Iran was to fall, Russia would be finished through. They would corner them, trap them off. Russia would be a great empire that's surrounded. While Wahhabis, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, with advanced military weapons. Russia not fucking stupid. Russia and Iran didn't even really get along years ago. They didn't get along. But now they understand the survival of Russia has to do. Russia and China wasn't getting along. China and North Korea wasn't getting along. The only thing they all have in common is they ass is grass if they do not help put some stability into the other countries. Make sure Iran don't fall. Make sure North Korea don't fall. Make sure China don't fall. Make sure Russia don't fall. Scott know this is fucking true. If Iran fall, China's finished too, because they're going to be next. They understand this. They're going to get surrounded, and it's going to be a repeat.
This war to end permanently.
Yes.
Not just about,
no, this is why I think the Russians are the best mediators, because the Russians understand what the Iranians want. Permanent. And they don't want this war to begin. They don't want Israel to be dropping bombs.
Listen. Iran is saying correctly, they want what the Russians is saying. They don't want all right. If Russia want Iran to have a ceasefire, then Russia should accept a ceasefire in Ukraine. Russia saying, fuck no, we're not accepting no ceasefire because you're just going to try to rearm and then continue attacking. Iran said, that's what we're saying. Fuck no, we don't want no ceasefire. They're just going to attack us again. This is the greatest opportunity Iran will ever have in a lifetime. They had these bastards on the ropes, and they can play crazy all they fucking want to. Though they just got to stand up straight. Let Israel and U.S. play crazy. Fuck that. They're just the best chance they got. And they don't need no fucking ceasefire. They're going to get attacked again in 6 more months. No. Everything got to get ironed out and straightened out right now.
This time next year, this time in 5 years. They don't want American forces back in the Middle East causing problems. When this war ends, done, finished. And then Iran can operate, with the economy being number one in their mind, how to, get into that Eurasian Economic Union and how to make BRICS flourish. Could you imagine how strong BRICS would be if the Iranian economic potential was unleashed? I mean, for all the idiots blowing up Iranian steel mills, they just don't use their brains. Do you know how quickly China is going to come rolling into Iran to help rebuild these steel mills when the war ends? Iran has huge economic potential. And if the sanctions can be lifted and normalization of economic relations, Iran will do to the Gulf Arab states what Russia did to Europe, I believe. I don't see the Iranians, saying, Dubai is the place we want to put our money. I don't see that happening. I see the Iranians saying, Gulf Arab states, you're sunk. We will have nothing. We're going to become the economic.
It depends on them. I think it depends on them because after all, when you talk about the leadership in the Arab states, in the Persian Gulf, it's different from the people in these countries. Iran considers the difference between the two. That's why I don't know if they change their attitude toward what's going on against Iran. And instead of cooperating with Israel and the United States to attack Iran, choose a different path. As we are witnessing right now with Oman, with the case of Oman, we see something different. It's not the way that UAE is. So it's
or Saudi Arabia. Remember, China came in and negotiated rapprochement. That turned out to be shallow. The Saudis can't be trusted. If I were the Iranians, I would never trust the Saudis ever again. And if I were the Iranians, I would never trust the UAE ever again. And if they're not careful, if this war goes on much longer, I think Iran's going to deal fatal blows to the UAE. You take out desalinization plants in the UAE and they're sunk. Now, that opens Iran up, but hell, didn't we just bomb an Iranian desalinization plant the other day? They retaliated by hitting a Kuwaiti desalinization plant. Hopefully people woke up and went, stop. Because, there's issues. But Iran can resolve its water issues. The Gulf Arab states can't. That's reality. We'll get back to the nuclear thing. I don't think this ends with Iran having 60% enriched uranium. I don't think it can end with Iran having 60% enriched uranium. And I'll tell you why. Because Iran's not going to physically defeat the United States. Iran wins by surviving. And they're winning right now. There's no doubt about that. But Iran will not physically defeat the United States. We're not going to put 50,000 troops on the ground to give Iran a chance to surround them, make a Dien Bien Phu moment, where they're marching Americans through the streets of Tehran. That's just not going to happen. Trump wants out of this war. I think that's the big message right now is he's desperate. So desperate, he just makes stuff up. If the Russians can come in and negotiate an end to the conflict that meets Iran's objectives, all of Iran's objectives, not compromising, all of them, I think the Russians would tell the Iranian leadership, if you want America gone, you got to give up the 6% enriched uranium. And then it comes down to the Iranians. I mean, I know that the things have changed. I mean, first of all, we're talking about Iran now that's been bombed. The horrors that we've done inflicted on the Iranian people are mind-boggling. Back home, we have no clue what we're doing. We've now run out of targets to hit, so we're hitting civilian infrastructure. And we're just bombing civilian homes now. We're leveling city blocks. We're committing war crimes beyond imagination. And it's not just in Tehran. We're striking other centers of the population as well. Shiraz, I'm just scared to death what we've done to the historical and cultural, treasures that were in Shiraz.
No, they ain't. They've been destroying cultural because they like to erase history too. Remember, all these wars is also about destroying historical sites. They doing it all through Iran. I'm gonna have to show you a live just on that, erasing civilization on purpose. They targeting that shit. But Scott talking about all the destruction that's going on. Look, the Iranians don't give a damn. They gonna survive. They don't give a shit. They gotta eat bread and drink water and ride mules. They ain't going back to how it was before. And shame on the United States not getting the fucking message. You can't threaten these people. Trump keep on the threat. I just will kill everybody. Just go on sound like Hitler more and more by the day. The people taking note of these threats by the U.S. because they understand the weakness. Iran just said send your troops in. How long you gonna keep threatening that? They're not negotiating with them. They don't go. They know you and Israel got nuclear weapons. They refuse to surrender. So all of that's bullshit. All that is to keep the white supremacist imperialists in the U.S. in these Western civilizations thinking they're still in control. Nobody who's paying attention think you are. If you use any nuclear weapons, you might well nuke yourself. Iran ain't going for that bullshit. No, it's time to man up. You won't be dictating to Iran about nuclear enrichment any fucking more. You won't be trying to run to your white brethren in Russia and try to have Russia save your ass. Putin warned you. Medvedev warned you. Now you done got yourself into some shit you can't get out of. Iran will be a nuclear power when this is all said and done. There's nothing they can do about it. They should have never did this. The U.S. will not dictate the terms, and Marines like Scott, white supremacists, have to get it to their fucking mindset. I said this before. We got to watch people like this because they can switch to any side, but they still enjoy the benefits. You see, he want some of his enemies politically to lose power, but while his society still retains the power. See, we still got to negotiate full surrender. That's all you need to negotiate. Sign your fucking signature, and it'll all go away.
Isfahan, again, what are we doing to these places? We Americans, we're going to celebrate our 250th anniversary. We're in there destroying things that have been around for thousands of years. Yeah. And
that's all you've been doing for 250 motherfucking years, destroying things. Never building, never helping, always just hurting, pillaging, and plundering. 250 motherfucking years of pillaging and plundering. That's who they are. People like Scott, they got to make up shit about the days when the military has some morality. What fucking time? Man, bro, listen, tell me the date so I can study that time. I haven't found one fucking day where they wasn't trying to kill people for their shit. And in 2026, Trump telling the truth. They pretend like Trump saying, we're going to take the oil. If this was an actual democracy, people would say, don't take him serious because the U.S. president can't dictate what we take. They say, oh, he got the power to do that because they give these for every president been a dictator. Every president has been the most powerful man in the history of history and all that shit and been doing whatever they want.
It's shocking. So Iran's paid a huge price. So I know that the calculation has changed, and I respect that fact. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that while the fact that Iran is willing to go all the way that's what's going to enable them to win the war. Is this willingness to go all the way. But at some point in time, all the way means suicide. It means everybody dies. At some point in time, though, the Iranian leadership has always talked about doing what's best for the Iranian people. And if a Russian mediator can come in and negotiate a great deal that ends all the nonsense.
See what I'm saying? A Russian negotiator. They might not want Russia to negotiate shit. They might want their brothers in the Middle East on me. No, you don't just ask Russia. And I fuck with the Russians, but who are they to negotiate this shit? No, none of that shit. Because you're still trying to get the white man, say the white man, that's over with. That's what Iran is telling you. No running to Russia this time, U.S. Ain't none of that shit. And then talking about killing everybody, man. Look, nobody in the fucking world believes the U.S. can get to kill 90 million Iranians, 20 million Iranians, 30 million Iranians. Man, please, bro. That's the end of America. They can't use that shit unless everybody dies, mean everybody dies. U.S. too. It's just at that. If that's what the U.S. want, then go do it. If you want to threaten to kill tens of millions of Iranians, go ahead and do it. Don't tell us about it. Just fucking do it so it all can end. But threatening people online and on the news, that shit ain't gonna fucking work. It actually make the U.S. look real fucking weak, bro. What do you mean kill everybody? You mean kill all the troops? You mean kill all the soldiers, the police officers? When you mean everybody, you talking about the men, women, kids? Man, please. That's why y'all ass got to be dealt with for talking like that.
And the only price Iran would have to pay is giving up 60% enriched uranium.
Nope.
I think that's something Iran, I would advise them to do it. Because holding on to it,
you would.
I don't see this. In order for Iran to get out of the NPT,
if Iran give up if they give up the enrichment that they got, the uranium that's enriched, that they can make nuclear weapons with, then they all gonna die. Are you crazy? No, take it. No, if you want it, they saying take it, bro. They ain't giving you that. What you understand about that? You done gave them your best to get it, and you can't send in your troops. This is what Scott doing, because he's a Marine. Deep down his heart, he don't want to see the Marines get humiliated, kidnapped, embarrassed, tens of thousands of them die. He trying the best he can to psychologically manipulate the Iranians. I done pointed that out before. This is psychological warfare. He's doing the FBI. They pay him to do this. What you can't take militarily, you don't get to negotiate from. No, you can't take it militarily. Why the fuck would they give it to you? You trying to get it. You killing everybody. No, bro, you're not getting that enriched uranium. You're just not getting it. That's the ace in the hole. If the shit hit the fan and you send millions of troops and the war is dragging out, nigga, in a couple of months, they have a nuclear fucking weapon and everybody can die.
NPT and have a nuclear weapons capability, you're going to have to defeat the United States. So now, does Iran have a plan that, because if we're dealing with a rational president,
see,
I think Iran has the cards.
See, they using Trump to scare the Iranians. Even he doing it. Listen, man, I'm trying to tell you, Trump not rational. Just listen, I'm your buddy. I'm Scott. Listen to me. Just make him think he winning. Give up your nuclear enrichment. Everything will be okay. Now, he's crazy. He might kill everybody. They don't give a fuck about that. He crazy. They the ones willing to die. He not. None of that we crazy shit any fucking more, playing crazy with the whole world. If he that crazy, you that crazy, bring your ass to Iran. How not gonna get it, bro? Talking about more troops getting sent to the Middle East. They heard it all fucking before, but they don't see them bastards. When will they see the might of the U.S.? Just trying to drive over people and bomb them, that's coward shit. No military nigga respect that. Send in your forces, your special ops, your Green Berets, the SEAL Team 6 that you fucking keep bragging about, your paratroopers you've been taunting about on the fucking news, man. Listen, bro, time is ticking, fam. But steady coming on TV and threatening to kill everybody, it makes the U.S. look weaker than they're already looking on the battlefield, bro.
Economic strangulation. See, a rational president would actually care that there's no diesel fuel in Australia right now, because Australia is an ally. A rational president would care that there's gas rationing in South Korea and Japan, because they're our allies. A rational president would be very concerned about what's happening to the European economy, because they're our allies. We have an irrational president who is, it's a cult of personality, and it's all about the ego of him. He's the only thing that matters right now. And the Russians are unique in their ability to understand that. Putin has been playing Trump's ego, masterfully. I mean, anybody who doubts it, take a look where Russia is right now. They were literally ready in 2027 to do drastic changes, economic belt tightening, that we're going to have, that was going to bring real economic pain to the people of Russia. Or end of this year, I'm sorry. And Putin went, no, we're not worried about that anymore. Why? Because they just won the lottery. Suddenly money's just flowing in. They're going, wait a minute, we don't have to.
Iran should not trust Russia to negotiate this fairly. I fuck with Putin. But naturally, he's going to try to benefit himself in Ukraine. That's just going to be his instincts as a survivalist people. He's going to say, I can help you with Iran, but what you going to give me in Ukraine? Oh, that's already not. Iran don't need none of that type of shit. Nah, it got to be somebody who don't need nothing. Can't be Russia, bro. Nah, because, hell nah. Russia cannot negotiate for Iran and give up any. Russia already told Iran, look, this is what we'll do. We will get the nuclear enrichment uranium. We will keep it. Iran said, hell no. No, we already was gonna do that. No, hell no. You're not keeping nothing for us. We'll keep it ourselves. If you wanna really defeat the West militarily, give us the weapons and the information we need. That's the help. But all that, Scott, see, these are the great white hope. This is still there's still a great white hope mentality. No, revolution is a way of life. No, I'm saying, and Iranians know that Russia can help, but they ain't so Russia to negotiate a motherfucking thing. Russia need to worry about the fucking war in Ukraine, nigga. No, that ain't happening, bro. No.
To do these belt tightening things. We're solving it, and it's only going to get better for Russia economically.
Shit, Burkina Faso might negotiate that peace, nigga. It might happen. Hell no. It might be South Africa. It might be anybody. It might be Niger. We don't know. Might be held in Cuba. We don't know. It don't just get to be Russia all the time. Russia got to understand things are changing too, bro. They need militarily help, but they ain't got to be sitting down at every fucking table. That's way too much power. And I don't like it. Just don't leave a good taste in my mouth that people like Scott, we can't trust some of this bullshit you're saying. They talking about Russia. Nah, bro. Who told you to say that? Nah, who told you to say that shit? China might be doing some negotiating here. Why you didn't say China? They ain't in no war. Why Russia? So Russia can benefit from the negotiations with the Ukrainian war. Now, Iran already said that's what they did the first time. With Trump. Try to get a little something doing their negotiations. Nah, hell no. This shit too serious for those type of games.
Why? Because Putin had patience. For all the people going, all the Gilbert doctoros out there saying, red lines, you let them red line. Well, Gil, if we had done what you wanted to do, there'd be a permanent state of warfare between Russia and Europe right now. Instead, Russia's winning across the board. There's not a single aspect.
Fuck that shit. Putin's way too patient with the West. Putin one step from getting overthrown in Russia, nigga. They had enough of that nigga, bro. Fucking U.S. and Ukraine and ISIS killing dozens of people, and while they trying to watch concerts, generals and lieutenants and regular people getting killed all over in terrorist attacks, they bombing all kind of shit. They trying to kill Putin. Look, bro, Putin, these people in Russia, they like, hey, bro, you been too fucking nice. Putin has not handled that situation. He done emboldened these motherfuckers over here in the West with that bullshit. Hell no. That's why I'm so glad that somebody next coming up, they ain't gonna play that. Medvedev or whoever, Russia, they ain't finna play that shit with these people, bro. No. Putin makes mistakes too, and he's made a bunch of mistakes in Ukraine, and he should have been stopped letting them people keep pushing him. That's why the fuck they did that in Syria. That's why it ain't no Nicolas Maduro. He's captured. That's why they bombing Iran, because Putin been too motherfucking nice. Shit, now Iran said fuck all that shit. Iran done doing shit to these people. Russia ain't never fucking did, nigga. Russia ain't never fucking did this to the U.S. in covert ops. They kill each other off the books, but just head up, destroying these bases. Russia ain't never fucking did that. They can, they should, but they fucking haven't. They know what the U.S. is doing to them in Ukraine. Putin keep being patient. Fuck all the patience, bro. You're putting the whole world in jeopardy. That's a fact, man.
Of this conflict that Russia isn't dominating. So much so they were able to send 700,000 barrels of oil to Cuba, break the American blockade because there's nothing America can do. And now Russia's patience, because they didn't react to any of the escalation, NATO's dead.
Look, Donald Trump Scott say Russia just broke the Cuban blockade, sent a bunch of oil and gas. Cuba been needed that shit. The only reason the U.S. and Trump is allowing that now is because the shit is hitting the fan in the global oil crisis. And they begging Putin, please, please, please release some of that oil to different people, and we'll let you send a couple of things to Cuba. Then they got the Trump on TV looking like a humanitarian. He didn't want to do that. He had to. But why Russia didn't do that last month or the month before that, before the Iran war started? No, hell no, man. Real revolutionaries peep that shit. No, China and Russia have not been defying that blockade on Cuba. That's a fact. That's another problem with the world got. Why the fuck they let Trump surround Cuba and starve them goddamn people out? That's bullshit, bro.
Pulling out of NATO. It's over. Finished. Goodbye. Remember I told you Mark Rutte would be the last Secretary General of NATO? Mark Rutte is going to be the last Secretary General of NATO. Easiest call to make, because Donald Trump's the easiest person to predict, which is why I'm telling you that if you don't get a negotiated deal, this egomaniac will use nuclear weapons.
Do it.
Because he's the guy that designed. Remember, it's under the first Trump administration
Ain't gonna be the last
that
US
the
president.
nuclear employment plan involving Iran was changed so that we could preemptively use nuclear weapons. And the trigger is an Iranian nuclear weapon. That's the problem. If we had a rational president, we wouldn't be doing this. First of all, we wouldn't be where we're at. But we have an irrational president. And therefore, this is where I think the Russians are the only ones that can do this. There's no other nation out there right now that can serve as the liaison between Israel, the United States, and Iran. Russia has good relations with all three of them. So I'm hopeful. But again, the idea that the Iranians are going to walk away with 60% enriched uranium when this is all over, I don't see that happening. I understand where you're coming from, and I understand the sentiment, and I understand the justification for keeping it. But
why are these auto insurance ads lying to you? I'm a car insurance agent, and I've been in this industry long enough to call out the nonsense. These ads that promise
you know, Ayatollah Khomeini.
I think Scott, when you talk about what
the Iran-Iraq war ended with the supreme leader saying, "I will drink this cup of poison to bring an end to this conflict."
Yeah. Scott, I think right now the main concern on the part of Iran is not the enriched uranium, because they're capable of producing at any level. They have the knowledge, they have everything.
Understand what lose mean.
They know it's not something to be bombed, it's not something to be destroyed in Iran. It's forever in Iran.
Forever. I agree with you. And I've said it before. I was on your show, I've said it. And I'll say it again. I've never backed away from it. Iran can already build a nuclear bomb. They've solved everything. All they need is the decision. But I will point this out.
Playing with them and find out the hard way.
Witkoff misunderstood when Araghchi said we have 460, I don't know.
450, yeah.
Kilograms of uranium hexafluoride enriched at 60%.
These people always said the missiles that you see in Iran use right now, they didn't have them, said they didn't work. That's a fact. It's on record. Just like they said North Korea didn't have the missiles, they said North Korea didn't have intercontinental ballistic missiles to reach the United States. Now they all got to admit that's true. They lie. You hear what he just admitted to you? It's a fact Iran can make a nuclear weapon. It's a fact. If you're playing with them, they can put one together. It's also going to be a fact. You keep fucking with them, you're going to find out they do have the technology to make the intercontinental ballistic missile. They do have the technology, nigga, to hit the United States. That is they ace up they don't want to reveal that yet. See, these motherfuckers keep talking about nuking Iran. If you nuke Iran, Washington gonna get hit. Take all kind of different places gonna get hit with nuclear weapons, and they're gonna be shocked. Tens of millions of Americans dead. Just like now, they shocked. Iran could fight back. They didn't blow up all their missiles. Come on, man. These people don't know what the fuck they talking about as far as they underestimation of Iran, and they need to stop doing that shit. So it costs them millions of Americans.
Uranium. And Witkoff went, "You're telling us you have the ability to build 10 nuclear weapons." I would have bitch slapped Witkoff right there and said, "That's not what they're saying, you stupid moron." All the Americans were around saying at the end of June that we don't know where it is, that the Iranians could be building a bomb. What Araghchi said was, "We're not building a bomb. We have it all, and we're willing to give it up.
Yeah.
Therefore, there will be no bomb. We have it all. We're willing to give it up. No bomb." There was no threat implied there at all. It was Iranians saying, "We haven't done anything with it. We haven't enriched it up higher. We haven't turned it into metal. We haven't done anything. It's all here." And if the Iranians can make that statement today to the Russians and say, "Yeah, because if the Iranians come back and say, well, we only got 250 kilograms of it left," people are going, 3 bombs, which I think might be the case. But hopefully that isn't the case. Hopefully Iran can say, "No, we still have it all." Because that means that they haven't weaponized, that they haven't taken that step. But they said back in 2024, 2025, a senior Iranian Revolutionary Guard people. We have everything we need, but the core. We have the warhead. We have all the safety stuff that goes along with that. All these missiles they're firing, every single one of them has components that are linked to a nuclear delivery system. I mean, so the Iranians have already tested everything. That's the other beauty of it, is we've given the Iranians all these advanced missiles they're testing right now, while they're firing. This is their nuclear delivery systems. And they work. And the components, for instance, the charges that are used to release the submunitions and all this stuff, it's the same principle that'll be used to fire, a nuclear weapon. And it's all being tested. The vibration testing is good. Everything's good. So there's literally nothing to stop the Iranians other than themselves. If they wanted, they could have enriched this stuff up to.
He admit to why the fuck would they give you the only thing that's gonna save their civilization? Why would they give that to you, bro? Why would they give that to you in some negotiations when they're winning the motherfucking war? That don't even make sense. And the only thing you can do, you can't say we're gonna send in ground troops. They're begging you to do that. The only thing you can do is say we will kill everybody. You don't get to do that in the day and age we live in. I don't give a fuck if you Donald Trump or whoever. You don't get to do that. And that's going to be the fall of the American empire. I'm talking about for real, for real. That's going to be the end of us. We're going to get nuked. 100 million people might die instantly. Nobody going for that shit, bro. You losing to the Iranians and you tell them, give us everything or everybody die. Man, come on. That's pathetic.
The 92, 94%, 98% if they wanted to, turn it into a metal and make it, we're talking about basic gun design. So it'd be 12 to 20 kilotons of stuff. You don't have to test it. Everyone's like, we're waiting for the Iranians to test. We never tested it. The first bomb dropped on Japan was a gun design. Never tested. The design that was that was tested at Alamogordo was a plutonium weapon, a compression, implosion weapon. Gun design it's the simplest thing in the world. Slug, boom, critical mass, boom. It's not efficient. You're wasting a lot of potential, but 12 to 20 kilotons. 3 of those, Israel no longer exists. And Iran can do that. And the Iranians now know that it isn't going to get shot down. They're testing it right now. It isn't going to get shot down. And it'll hit what it's aimed at. So the Iranians are in the driver's seat. If they want, and this is why I think Russia needs to come in right now and just bring it into this and say, because you don't want to go there. Look, I know the Iranians' pride has been hurt. You've been attacked. You've been stabbed in the back. You've been bombed. You've been betrayed. My God, if I were an Iranian, I'd be screaming nuke them. I wouldn't be sitting here trying to be Mr. Rational. I'd be saying, no, take Israel off the map. Israel deserves to be taken off the map. I have no sympathy for the state of Israel. There's no place on the earth that deserves to be nuked more than Israel. But that doesn't solve the problems. And Iran doesn't want to go down in history as that nation either. That's not the legacy of what Iran wants. So let's see what the Russians can do. Let's see if the Russians get engaged. That's still no guarantee. But I think Donald Trump is desperate right now. Desperate. I'm anxious to see what he's going to say tonight. I'm anxious to see what kind of, I love it. I forget which Iranian, was it the president or was it Aragchi that said he's negotiating with himself? It's perfect.
Yeah,
That's what
it was Aragchi, the foreign minister of Iran.
Yeah, it's perfect. He's holding a negotiation with himself. It's a fantasy. The Iranians have been very clear about it. First of all, there are no negotiations, even through intermediaries. The fact that they pick up a phone call from the Pakistanis doesn't mean they're negotiating.
But Scott, the problem is that Donald Trump, he doesn't follow himself during the day. In 1 hour says something and the other. How can you deal with this?
You can't. This is why the Russians have to be the mediators. There's no way Americans can sit down with the Iranians. There's no way. How could the Iranians ever trust? And in order for there to be an American that the Iranians could trust, the Trump administration has to be gone, and a whole new administration comes in. J.D. Vance can't be trusted. There was talk about he was going to be. J.D. Vance can't be trusted. Tulsi Gabbard can't be trusted. None of them can be trusted. There's nobody in Washington, D.C. right now that can be trusted to be the mediator. But there is a modicum of trust between Russia and the United States. There's a relationship with Kirill Dmitriev and Steve Witkoff that could possibly be exploited. And so if the Russians could sit down and mediate this thing, I think you could get a deal very quickly. I don't think Israel has too many cards left to hold. I think Israel has just been shown to be a nation state that's being taken apart piece by piece by piece by piece. I don't know what the battle damage assessment is from last night. I do know that the Israeli contention that the Iranians were down to their last 27 launchers was disproved dramatically. We'll see. But this is so frustrating. I didn't want to do your show today because I knew I was going to lose my temper. Not at you, but just the situation. I'm so frustrated by this whole thing. This angers me. To be an American and see your government behave this way, it's such a fundamentally un-American thing to do. Look, I know America's arrogant. I know we've been arrogant for a long time. Hell, guys.
You was arrogant. He said the Marines, would you know what the Marines were doing? He know what the Marines is finna go up against, and he's just trying to save face by. He want Iran to surrender to save the further humiliation of America, and that's not right. That's not right. And prophecy have got to be fulfilled, bro. Fall of the empire.
All the guys saying we're arrogant. Why not? We're the superpower. Superpowers are arrogant. You're supposed to balance that arrogance with
no. You was a superpower. You wasted that long time ago. That's been over with for a long time. Clearly, America is not a superpower. They got to stop saying that. You are a power. You're very powerful. You're one of the most powerful countries in the world. You're not a superpower, or that Strait of Hormuz would be open. You would send your navies. If you would have sent your navies if you was a superpower. So they got to quit saying that. That's still trying to save some face and puff up your chest. No, Iran has put an end to that myth once and for all, bro. If America is a superpower, then what the fuck is Iran? And that's what they got to do. If you are a superpower, America, and Iran is kicking you and Israel ass, then what the hell are they?
Responsible thinking, an appreciation of humanity, to try and do the right thing. A framework of law, imperfectly as it is implemented, at least, it's there. This president's thrown that all out. We are in the wild, wild west. And it's not good. It's not a good look for us abroad. It's not a good look for us at home. The constitutional republic is dead. And so I'm very frustrated.
Actually, Lavrov commented on that, Scott. Lavrov talk about it. Here is what Lavrov said about international law.
Ago, President Trump said that he's not interested in international law. He has his own moral and his own understanding of what's right and wrong. Some elements of international life harken back of times long past, when leaders of certain countries are abducted in broad daylight and city blocks are exterminated with biblical cruelty, and children's hospitals are being targeted, where hundreds of children die in an instant. Nuclear power plants are being bombed, nuclear power plants that are protected by international law and other facilities. And in this situation, nobody but us and our allies care about international law.
Yeah. It's literally pointing out that Donald Trump doesn't care about international law. He's just hitting. And this is the position of the official position of Russia when we hear it from Lavrov. He's not a negotiator like Kirill Dmitriev. He's someone who makes these policies.
He's the man. Peskov came out and said it's the Wild Wild West. It's the rule of the gun, and that Russia is going to have to adapt to that. Because when you have one rogue player, then everybody who complies with the law is at a disadvantage. And so this is why it's a very dangerous situation that we're in right. And this is why I'm so frustrated. So again, I apologize early on for that breach. I was tempted to call you up before the show and say, I'm just not in the mood. My brain's not wrapped around this enough, because there's just a lot of anger and frustration right now about everything. There's nothing good coming out of anything about my country right now. Nothing good. There's literally nothing good. It's all bad news. We're failing everywhere. There's no glimmer of hope. There's no light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes, it is.
We're looking at
plenty of hope for us. Plenty of light at the end of the tunnel. They have ruined themselves. It's the end of them. The prophecy is being fulfilled. Their wicked empires finally finna be finished and over. Yeah, first will be last and the last will be first. This is biblical. What the hell is he talking about?
Dark abyss, and so many Americans have just bought into this whole MAGA propaganda stuff. Mainstream media is totally sold out. There's no rational thought amongst them. And then, the independent media platforms. I mean, X has just become this horrific, platform that I don't know what they've done, but it just nonstop pro-Israeli, pro-Trump crap thrown out there, overwhelming. I mean, I'm grateful they haven't kicked me off, but it's not they say number one place for news in the world, but it's hard to even navigate to the news because you got to go through so much just crap and stuff, and so I was like, I promised Neem I'd be on 11 o'clock. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this, but I'm here. So it is what it is.
Scott, but by the way, when we look at the reality of what's going on right now, one of them is the Strait of Hormuz. Iran is going to keep the control of the Strait of Hormuz. They're not going to give it up. And the other, how do you see the way that could somehow bring some sort of sanity? You've mentioned the problems that these countries in the region are facing in terms of the security of the region. I'm talking about all these countries together. How do you see this new condition coming to the play when it comes to the security of the region?
Well, first of all, Iran has to prevail, meaning that, but I think Iran's made it clear that it alone will control the on-off switch for the Strait of Hormuz, which means they're not going to tolerate, games being played by Gulf Arab states. So in the future, if Kuwait wants to play a game, Kuwaiti ships won't be allowed to go through. And what, in was it 1987 or so, we did the Iranians and the Iraqis were hitting each other's islands and oil production, all that stuff. And so the United States reflagged a whole bunch of ships, American flags, and we sailed them through the Strait of Hormuz, American cover. And Iran didn't do anything. I mean, they tried to blink. We sunk their navy, and they didn't have any other options. But Iran learned from that. They learned from that experience, and we didn't. We somehow still believe that just simply sailing a destroyer through the Strait of Hormuz would secure the Strait of Hormuz. That's all it took. And Iran basically created a integrated, straight interdiction capability that can't be defeated. Void of, literally, you'd have to put 250,000 troops on the ground. That's the minimum number necessary to do a landing at, say, Chabahar, and then sweep up the coast and sweep the Iranian coastline around the strait of all capabilities. But even then, that's problematic. It's rugged terrain. The Iranians aren't prone to surrender, and so I just. This is a big deal for Iran. It forever changes the landscape because it gives Iran the ability to dictate outcomes and to influence outcomes. Meaning, when there's negotiations now, people can't play the bluff Iran game. Do this or else we'll do that. The Iranians are like, we'll just hit the off switch, and we know what that means. And it gives Iran leverage against Europe and everybody else too. So if Iran can retain this, and I believe they will, I think that'll be one of the preconditions. And the Iranians will say, yeah, you just have to charge, you have to pay a price, a toll. If you pay the toll, you get passage. If you don't get passage. It's that simple. And it's not about the income generation. It's about the control. It's about the leverage that comes with the control. And I think this is a big deal. And this is going to be a very painful pill for the president. This is why you hear the president saying it went from we have to force the Strait of Hormuz to we don't care about the Strait of Hormuz to you have to force the Strait of Hormuz again, because, he knows, first of all, the Strait of Hormuz for the United States, it's not crucial. We don't need it to survive. But the global economy does, and it impacts global energy prices. But the president can't be seen as being weak on this one. So, this is one of those key points for the Iranians that shows that they're not weak. That they look, if they were getting beat as bad as PSS said, they wouldn't be controlling the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, that's as simple as it gets. And last night, was it Wave 89? I mean, 100 big missiles fired. Pretty good.
No, you look at, Scott, most of Israelis are living in the bunkers. You look at Iran, nobody's living in the bunker. They know that they're getting bombed by the, fighter jets, but they're not living. This is the reality of two different countries.
The other thing, too, is, the longer this war goes on, the more difficult it is going to be for the U.S. and Israel to sustain this. The F-35 fighter wasn't built for this kind of sustained combat operations. At some point in time, they're going to have to, go in for maintenance. And then the other thing is, we're using up all of the precision guided munitions, standoff munitions, to drop bombs in the future. You're going to have to come in with, laser guided or satellite guided bombs, but that means you have to get closer to the target. And what we're seeing is the Iranians put a whole bunch of stuff underground, including half their Air Force. And so, at some point in time, the nature of this war is going to change. They're going to continue to degrade E3s. People need to understand that you blow up an AWACS, AWACS is sort of what allows us to dominate the skies because it gives us total situational awareness, communications, boom, boom, boom. I think the Iranians have several tricks up their sleeve that they haven't used yet, up to and including anti-satellite weapons, meaning that the Iranians could, blind the United States. And when the time comes, if necessary, they will. I don't think Iran's done unveiling capabilities. What is the United States doing? We're mobilizing the third aircraft carrier. Again, if we were serious about this war, we would have 3 aircraft carriers on station when it began. Actually, we would have had 7 because that's sort of what we went into Desert Storm with. But we're not serious about this war. This is a made-up war, and we can't afford it. It's destroying our economy and destroying the Pentagon's budget. The ramifications of this, we are chewing up munitions to the point where we literally won't be able, if we ever wanted to defend Taiwan against China, we no longer have that capacity. It's over. If we pull out of Europe and the Ukrainians pull another one of their stupid Baltic state end around, drone, we pull out of NATO and the Ukrainians launch a drone attack, the Baltic states will be taken over by Russia. And there's nothing anybody can do to stop it. Because, I just remember all these, air power guys. We'll come in with air power. We'll hit the Russians like they've never been hit before. And I'm like, really? But now you hit the Iranians. They didn't have anything close to what the Russians have, and they're sort of winning. And now you're telling me that now this NATO Air Force that has no standoff weapons anymore? None, because it was really the Americans that delivered. The Germans have the Taurus. The Taurus won't be around after day 3 of Russian drone attacks against Germany, okay? Because there is no air defense in Germany, none. So drones will just be sitting there going anywhere they want, hitting whatever they want. That's all of Europe right now. Russians are building 1,000 drones a day at their factory in near Kazan. They use 200, 300, 400 a day against Ukraine. Where's the other drones going? Oh, stockpiled. So when the time comes, Russia will be able to flood the skies of Europe with these drones. There's no air defense against them whatsoever. And that'll be the end of Europe. Literally, Russia won't have to come in with, they'll do the Ereshnik for shock and awe, but they don't need the Ereshnik. The drones will just come in and take care of everything. So the United States has crippled itself literally, we have crippled ourselves. We have, in our defense industry, can't catch up. I mean, Donald Trump can have all the meetings he wants. Reality is reality. Who's funded the factories? Has Congress allocated that money? Okay, you build the factories. How quickly does it take for you to build that? You can't. You can do a lot of waivers, but at the end of the day, you still got to do like site surveys and environmental hazard tests, or else you open it up to long-term lawsuits. These tests sometimes take months, if not years, if you haven't pre-done them. You build the factory, you hire the people. In order to do that, you have to have contracts that justify the expenses. Has Congress, said we're going to buy this? Are we there? We're never going to recover from this. I mean, this is the sad truth. Actually, it might be the good truth. The fact is that it is the good truth. The good news is America will never recover from this militarily. And then we will have to downsize, which is why Trump getting out of the Middle East is a realistic possibility, because I think right now he's desperate to get out of the Middle East. He always wanted to get out of the Middle East, but he couldn't get out of the Middle East until the Israeli-Iranian thing was resolved. And now there's the potential for a resolution. Then we can get out of the Middle East. Because what Trump wants is Fortress America. He wants to come in and secure the Western Pacific or Western Hemisphere and then project ourselves into the Pacific. But the key aspect of the national security strategy, 2025 version, was to have military overmatch with the Chinese. Well, how can you have military overmatch if you can't defend yourself? How can you have military overmatch if all of your long-range standoff strike weapons have been used? You have nothing left. It's the other way now. We have guaranteed Chinese military supremacy in the Pacific. That's it. We're never going to recover from this. We're going to get out of NATO because we can't stay in NATO. We don't have enough military power to project ourselves into NATO anymore. So I think this Iran conflict will go down in history as, being one of the more transformational conflicts ever, because the Iranian victory, and I do believe Iran is going to win this war, will result in the United States not just withdrawing from the Middle East, but from Europe and the Pacific. You're defeating, Iran is defeating America globally. It's a big deal. It's a huge deal.
Scott, the other issue, we know that Netanyahu wanted this war for such a long time. He wanted to go against Iran. And he said, this is the head of octopus. And the main reason for that was he sees, the axis of resistance as an octopus, and Iran is the head of octopus. You have to destroy Iran, then the whole axis of resistance going to disappear from the scene. It didn't happen when it comes to Lebanon. Lebanon is fighting back fiercely. And
Didn't I tell you that? I said that Lebanon's in pause mode, that the loss in Nasrallah, they had to turn to domestic issues in Lebanon, so Hezbollah took a back seat. But that Hezbollah had not been defeated, and Hezbollah had never withdrawn from the south. They did some political withdrawals, but they always had the ability to come back, and that their missile capabilities weren't fully retarded. And now, thanks to American stupidity, the Lebanese government has been exposed as nothing more than an agent of Israel. The Lebanese army is as impotent as the day is long. I mean, they incapable of fighting, defending Lebanon. The only force that's capable of defending Lebanon is Hezbollah, and they're kicking the crap out of Israel today. The Israeli ground are just people. This is one of those big awakening moments. You remember how in 1967, the supremacy of the Israeli ground forces played out against all Arab armies, with the exception of maybe the Jordanians who fought well, but there wasn't enough of them. Hezbollah is proving that an Arab army can defeat the Israelis in a stand-up fight. It's over for Israel. It's over. They've lost this war. They're mobilizing reservists. The reservists don't want to fight. And who are Israeli reservists? These aren't, these aren't boys who've been kept in a basement, with a weight set, and they throw raw meat down on occasion, and they're sitting there growling and ready to go. Come out of the basement, like Daenerys's dragons in the Game of Thrones when they came out and they burned the ships down. No, that's not it. These are a bunch of effeminate little soy boys who want to sit in air-conditioned offices and do tech development. That's the big Israeli thing. I'm a tech developer, and then they wear their overtly tight clothes and they prance around. And now they're being told they have to go do their military service. And they're like, well, no, I want to be in an air-conditioned office doing tech development. No, you got to go, and you got to go to southern Lebanon. You mean I got to go fight Hezbollah? Yeah, nobody wants to fight Hezbollah. There's not you can get their special operations forces may want to fight Hezbollah, but the mainstream Israeli army, they don't want to fight Hezbollah. They're scared to death. The 7th Armored Brigade lost the equivalent of 2 battalions fighting Hezbollah. This is their elite armored brigade, the 7th. They're the elite guys, and they're getting crushed by the Radwan forces. Lebanon, Hezbollah owns southern Lebanon. At some point in time, Lebanon, Hezbollah has been preparing for a counterstrike into Galilee. Let's see what happens when that happens. How Israel responds when suddenly Kiryat Shimona is no longer Israeli, but they have the flag of Hezbollah rose up over it. Ansarallah now is entering. They can shut down the Bab. Oh shoot! I almost had a perfect track record. Bab al Mandeb.
Yeah.
Straight in a heartbeat. But more than that, they can defeat the Saudi army in a stand-up fight. I mean, we're at the state right now where Saudi military preparation is non-existent. And if the Yemeni wanted to, they can retake, they can, and I say retake because southern Saudi Arabia used to be Yemen.
I'm not really a cupcake, but I am super baked, thanks to Mood Can.
Mood is third-party tested, so you know.
Stolen by the Saudis. Yemen can go in there and take them, and that may be the result of this.
And it has all the oil.
Well, in the east too, the eastern provinces, you can get the Shia to rise up and be very disruptive. I think again, I think Iran is in a position where it's not only going to compel the United States to leave the Middle East, abandon NATO, and withdraw from the Pacific, but we could see the end of the Al Saud family in Saudi Arabia, which would be beautiful, wonderful, perfect. We could see the end of the corrupt Emiratis, the end of the corrupt Kuwaitis, the end of the corrupt Bahrainis. Even Qatar may not survive this. Oman, I think they're a little bit better off. But this could be transformational for the region. The irony, I mean, we could just keep going down this way, that Kuwait becomes the 14th province of Iraq when this is done. Because if you get the corrupt Kuwaiti emirs to flee, the Iraqis, it isn't going to be Saddam Hussein that's going to be doing it. It's going to be the Shia of Iraq saying, come on home, baby. And there could be no better outcome from this war. I mean, a weakened Israel, a chastened Israel, an Israel that is no longer capable of projecting its brutal aggression the way it does, is the best result. Second to getting the United States out of the region. But the third result would be cleaning house in the Gulf Arab states, cleaning house. And it would be great because these corrupt families have brought nothing good to the region. It's fake. Whatever they do is fake. Dubai was fake, always artificial. Have you been to Dubai? I've been to Dubai. It's artificial. It's just a fake place, 100% fake. And I mean, it's fun. It was, but it was built on the backs of, oil money and then Western capital coming in to create this perception of a financial center. Artificial now. It's gone. They're not going to recover from this. And I think there would be no better outcome than to see these Gulf Arab states all collapse and the people of the region elect their leaders. No more nobility, no more kings, no more sheiks, no more emirs. It's time for presidents and prime ministers. That's how you transform the Middle East, because now this money, the money that's going to be taken out of the ground, you're no longer, how much money goes into the pockets of these Saudi princes so they can afford all this stuff, their lavish lifestyles. I mean, they're robbing the people blind. It's time for the oil money to go to a government of the people, by the people, for the people, and take care of them. And we need the United States to get the hell out of there. Imagine Iraq without American involvement. I mean, God, Iraq could still live up to so much potential. And the same thing with Iran. I mean, I can't even imagine what Iran would be like in a sanctions-free environment without worrying about, American bases to their left and their right, living in peace with their neighbors. It would be a paradise. I mean, such a beautiful country to begin with. Could you imagine if Iran was able to take money and, the hypocrisy of Marco Rubio. If the Iranians weren't so busy building missiles, they could invest their people. Hey, Marco, come to Albany and look at the frickin' potholes, pal. Come take a look at the infrastructure. The bridges are getting ready to collapse. Maybe if we didn't spend trillions of dollars buying weapons to carry out illegal wars of aggression, we'd have a better home too, Marco. The hypocrisy of the American leadership. I mean, the amount of money we're spending waging war. $200 billion is what we're asking to pay for this conflict. Crazy.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Scott, for being with us.
All right. Cool. Follow me.